Chapter 4961. Arbor hastily shook her head. I'll also go take a look. No. Duan Yu naturally wouldn't let her run down and take risks, so he quickly dissuaded her. It'll be quick. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Xiao Mu lowered her head to look at her stomach before reluctantly nodding in agreement. After Duan Yu went down, the little stoic paced back and forth in front of the fault. Xiaoyi was a bit alarmed by this and quickly advised, Crown Princess, don't stand on the edge of that cliff while you're still here. Perhaps that damn fault would suddenly snap. If even a strand of hair on the Crown Princess' head was harmed, who knew how His Majesty would go berserk? Arbor glanced at the ice platform beneath her feet before turning to look at Xiaoyi. She expressionlessly walked to his side and stood still. Does that ancient Great Sealing Array have an array core? Let me see it. Xiaoyi quickly shook his head. There isn't an array core. We've already checked inside and out. There's only an empty hole in the array. There's nothing else. Xiao Mu was puzzled. This is strange. Logically speaking, for such a large ancient matrix to seal something, it must have a corresponding matrix core. While she was muttering to herself, Duan Yu leaped up from below the ice and hurried to her side. It's connected to the sea below. That sacred beast should have entered the sea. Arbor looked at Duan Yu in astonishment and quietly asked, then what about Emollien and Rotten Peach Blossom? Why are they missing? Not only that, Duan Yu said seriously. Jojo, Xiaoyi, and the others have already searched inside and out. There are many artifacts left behind by the aboriginals here. This means there should have been many people living here. Then where are they now? Duan Yu looked down at Arbor. Arbor only felt her heart beating abnormally fast. That little heart seemed about to jump out of her chest. Where could they be? Duan Yu's heart clenched when he saw her inexplicably nervous expression and the abnormally pale complexion on her petite face. He hurriedly said, they probably fought with that sacred beast all the way out. Saying this was indeed very far-fetched. After all, it seemed that only the footprints of the chaos behemoth could be found in the pits of different depths. There was no trace of Emollien and the venerable Peach Blossom immortal. Don't worry, Jojo. Let's keep looking. We'll find that guy eventually. Duan Yu couldn't bear to see the little stoic on the verge of tears the most, so he repeatedly pacified her, let's summon more people and search every nook and cranny of the river of forgetfulness. We'll definitely find him. The little stoic glanced at him listlessly. But you have to return to Cangzhou. Duan Yu was taken aback, and he couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Although this little fellow usually doesn't say anything, she sees everything clearly. Duan Yu was indeed busy with affairs in Cangzhou. He had already received more than a dozen letters from Prime Minister Wu, earnestly requesting him to quickly return to Cangzhou. In any case, I've already come out. Duan Yu winked at the little fellow. Who cares, I'll stay for a while longer before going back. Sir Jojo peered at him and said solemnly, Duan Yu, thank you. Duan Yu sighed softly. There's no need for thanks between us. Arbor pondered before saying, we'll set a deadline of 5 days. If we still can't find him, I won't look anymore. Sir Jojo was angry, humph. Chapter 4962. Jojo, there's no need to be in such a hurry. Duan Yu hastily persuaded, wait 2 more days. I'll transfer more people over to search. No, it's settled then. Arbor turned around and pattered away after saying this. Her little stoic face was puffed up with anger, and she couldn't muster the energy to speak for a long time. Duan Yu couldn't help but feel helpless. He naturally understood Jojo's thoughts. The little fellow didn't want to make things difficult for him. After all, with his current status, his actions during this period of time were truly too willful and reckless for him to directly abandon the state of affairs and wander back and forth in the river of forgetfulness. Jojo. Duan Yu quickly chased after her. Then let's return to Zhangzhou together after a while. I won't leave until you agree. He naturally wouldn't be reassured to leave her all alone on this boundless sea again. Moreover, she was pregnant now, so she needed to rest and recuperate even more. The little fellow had truly suffered too much during this period of time. Look at her little face, it had lost a whole size. He must take her back and properly nourish her. She probably wouldn't be able to recover in 2 or 3 days. Truly pitiful. Don't worry, leave more people here. As long as there's news about that swindler, they'll definitely notify us immediately. Arbor pursed her lips and didn't say anything. In reality, she was still planning to have Duan Yu return first to handle matters while she stayed behind to continue waiting for Jojo's lotus. However, she also understood that Duan Yu absolutely wouldn't approve of her plan. He's not in the seabed abyss right now, and I don't know where he's fighting with that sacred beast. If we can't receive his message, it's not a good idea to just sit and wait for him. Duan Yu continued to persuade, listen to me, don't be exposed to the wind and sun on the sea all the time. We'll return to the city first. When we receive definite news, you can use the transportation talisman matrix to send it. Isn't it just a matter of minutes? Arbor couldn't resist pursing her lips. She looked back at Duan Yu, who kept nagging behind her, and couldn't resist rolling her eyes. Why are you acting like you're possessed by a little monk? How can it be that simple? There's a limit to the distance of a directional transportation talisman matrix. However, as long as they grasped the general direction, they could still reach their destination after a few more teleportations. Thinking about it this way, Duan Yu's words were quite reasonable. Hey, look! What's that thing floating over there? Duan Yu and Arbor had just leaped out of the underwater abyss one after the other when they heard the hidden guards shout. The two of them looked towards the surface of the sea and saw a person being swept up in the sea. He was struggling to stretch out an arm and flop on the water surface with great effort. Arbor took a glance and retracted his gaze. There was not much reaction on his face. Duan Yu, on the other hand, raised his brows slightly as he stood with Jojo at the entrance of the undersea abyss. They also looked in that direction from a considerable distance away. They saw that the unknown person was being swept up and down by the seawater, floating towards them. When they got closer, the two of them could see clearly that it was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 50s. Arbor sniffed. It's the aura of talisman power. Oh. This person is a great talisman master. They must have used something like a teleportation array. He was probably tricked by the non-directional transportation talisman matrix and didn't expect to land in the river of forgetfulness, so he directly fell into the sea. Duan Yu, this troublemaker, nodded and said, let's capture him first. Arbor, are you serious about doing this? We don't know who he is either. Let's interrogate him first. Chapter 4963. Duan Yu pulled Arbor onto the small boat that Xiaoyi and the others had prepared in advance and ordered aloofly, go, capture him first and interrogate him thoroughly. Yes, Your Majesty. After receiving the order, Xiaoyi nimbly led his men forward and pulled out a net used for fishing, dragging the man out of the sea. They were very nimble and swiftly dragged the man to the bow of the boat. One of them flipped the middle-aged man over while the other used a spirit-binding rope to tie his hands behind his back. Xiaoyi heavily slapped that man's back. After a wah sound, the man coughed and spat out 2 mouthfuls of water before turning to look at Xiaoyi and the others in a daze. Duan Yu glanced over, and Xiaoyi immediately pulled out a dagger from his sleeve and pressed it against the man's neck. He asked in a chilly tone, speak, who are you and where did you teleport over from, punk? A trace of panic flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes, and he hastily cried out, "Heroes and warriors, spare me, spare me. This lowly one is a merchant who encountered a robbery while sailing, he's lying." Arbor dryly interrupted the man's explanation. On the side, Wu Yi didn't say anything and smashed a fist into that man's chin. The middle-aged man grunted, and Wu Yi's stern reprimand rang in his ears, "Speak honestly." "Ah, cough, cough, cough." The middle-aged man repeatedly coughed and panted as he looked at the people before him in horror. You guys. Who are you? What do you want to do?" "You used a transportation talisman matrix, so talisman energy is still flowing around your body. How could you be a simple merchant?" This person was full of flaws, yet he still wanted to pretend. Although the middle-aged man's expression remained calm, his black pupils contracted slightly. From the little girl's voice, she didn't seem old, but her eyesight was astonishing. She actually saw that he used a transportation talisman matrix with a glance. The middle-aged man's arms were tied behind his back as he knelt there, so he could only try his best to turn his head to see which expert little girl exposed his origins. "Behave yourself." Wu Yi gave him a push. That middle-aged man took advantage of this to lie on his side. He rolled his eyes and strenuously turned his head to look in Qiao Mu's direction. Although he was already trying very hard to control his facial expression, Qiao Mu still saw a trace of shock and astonishment in the depths of his stormy eyes. Qiao Mu exclaimed in surprise and walked forward a few steps. The middle-aged man crawled backward as if he had seen a monster attacking him. His eyes hurriedly avoided Arbor's sharp gaze, not daring to look him in the eye. How rare! Arbor thought to himself. She had clearly never met this middle-aged man before, so why did he reveal such a guilty expression when he saw her? She was secretly curious and couldn't help but take a few steps closer to the middle-aged man. Duan Yu quickly chased after her and pulled her to his side. He warned with knitted brows, "This person's origins are unknown. Be careful." Arbor nodded and exclaimed in surprise. He tilted his head to look at that middle-aged man before turning to Duan Yu and saying, "Very strange." "What?" "His face is a bit strange." The middle-aged man's heart was about to jump out of his chest. His panicked expression revealed the fear in his heart at this moment. Arbor was curious and took a few steps closer to him. A small glass bottle suddenly slid out of her sleeve. Chapter 49-64. The brownish-yellow color of the bottle shimmered under the faint sunlight, and it was very beautiful. The middle-aged man shuddered for no reason, and he couldn't help but tense up. You, what do you want to do?" he shouted harshly. At this moment, even he himself didn't notice that his voice was trembling slightly. He was truly extremely afraid of this little great ant in front of him. Seeing this little great ant walking closer and closer to him, the middle-aged man's heart couldn't stop pounding violently. He kept feeling that something bad was about to happen. But the middle-aged man couldn't tell what it was. It wasn't until he saw this little great ant open the glass bottle's cork that a faint, strange fragrance wafted into his nose. The middle-aged man's body stiffened, and he couldn't stop shuddering. He was very familiar with this medicinal fragrance. He was too familiar with it. This was impossible. How could this little great ant know the usage of this medicine? Impossible. This was the one and only antidote to the directional shape-shifting medicinal liquid in the world. As long as he consumed it, he would immediately revert to his original form and reveal his original appearance. The middle-aged man was already panicking. He didn't expect that all the unlucky things would be piled together and happen one after another. Damn it. Jojo. Duan Yu pulled her back and looked down at the small glass bottle in her hand. What is this? Feed it to him. Feed it all down. Arbor disdainfully glanced at the ghastly pale middle-aged man on the ground before stuffing the glass bottle to Duan Yu. On the side, Xiaoyi quickly walked over and reached out to take the bottle from His Majesty. She walked up to the middle-aged man and looked at him with a strange expression. What was wrong with this middle-aged man? His expression looked like he had eaten feces. His face was yellow and ugly. Wasn't it just a bottle of medicinal liquid? Look at how frightened he was. Could it be that the little crown princess's bottle of medicinal liquid was extraordinary in some way? Go away. Don't grab me. The middle-aged man bellowed with reddened eyes under the suppression of several hidden guards. Duan Yu narrowed his eyes and sized up the man before him. He muttered to himself, have I seen him somewhere before? You know this ugly freak. Sir Jojo glanced at Duan Yu in disdain. Duan Yu couldn't help curling his lips in amusement. I keep feeling that you're a bit familiar, but I can't remember where I've seen you before. His memory wasn't bad. If he had seen someone once, he should be able to remember them. However, he couldn't recall the face of the middle-aged man in front of him, but he felt that he was vaguely familiar. She disguised herself. Ugly freak. Arbor said coldly, he took a kind of directional transformation liquid that can completely change his appearance in 3 days. No one knows about it. Duan Yu abruptly reacted, and his handsome face promptly chilled. Directional transformation medicinal fluid. He knew why the middle-aged man in front of him felt so familiar. Because he had seen this person before. At this very moment, the middle-aged man who had been forced to drink a small bottle of antidote was undergoing a complete transformation. Her originally flat body was gradually becoming curvaceous. She was still wearing the gray robe of an ordinary merchant, but her exquisite figure was wrapped in it. Even though she was wearing the same gray robe, she looked much better now. She sprawled on the ground, her beautiful eyes filled with resentment and indignation. Chapter 49-65. With a complicated expression, the woman coldly swept her gaze towards Arbor. You are the state of Doruo's third state preceptor, Shintu Jing, right? Duan Yu exposed the incomer's identity with a chilling glint in his eyes. Long time no see. How have you been, state preceptor? Arbor detected a strong hostility in Duan Yu's voice. The little stoic immediately turned her head and sized up state preceptor Shintu. The state of Doruo. She seemed to have never heard of it. Also, this woman looked to be around 26 or 27 years old. Her rosy cheeks were tinged with spring, and her dark brows were deeply furrowed. She looked to be an out-and-out beauty. She didn't expect her to be some state preceptor. Shintu Jing glared hatefully at the man and woman in front of her before her gaze finally landed on Arbor's face. She shouted coldly, even if you kill me, you can't stop the implementation of LoveLore's plan. Arbor was dumbfounded. What the hell? What LoveLore's plan? Arbor turned to look at the enraged Duan Yu in confusion. Judging from Duan Yu's reaction, he seemed to know about the transformation medicinal liquid and LoveLore's plan. You're courting death. Duan Yu's icy voice reached Shintu Jing's ears, and the latter shuddered abruptly. However, this woman insisted on suffering for her pride. She stiffly stiffened her neck and revealed a fearless expression. Kill me or torture me as you wish. But I just want to tell you too that LoveLore's plan won't be interrupted because of my death. Duan Yu raised his hand, and a silvery white flame scuttled out from his fingers. Just as it was about to land on Shintu Jing, Arbor quickly grabbed him and asked, "What's going on?" Jojo actually didn't understand. What LoveLore's plan? This strange conversation between the two of them made her feel as if she was being kept in the dark about something. Nothing. Duan Yu took a deep breath, trying his best to suppress the surging rage in his eyes. There must be something. Arbor tugged at his sleeve, unwilling to give up. Hurry and tell me. You're not allowed to deceive Jojo. Duan glanced at her and saw that the little stoic was staring fixedly at him with a pair of round eyes. He couldn't help but find it amusing. Okay, I'll tell you, but don't be angry. Arbor nodded. Go ahead. I won't be angry. You know, my mental endurance is pretty good. A moment later, Duan told Sir Jojo everything he knew about Lily Er's incident. Jojo's expressionless face was taut. Her eyes were burning with rage. Without another word, she pulled out a black ferrule and smashed it down toward Shintu Jing's head. Bang! Bang bang! Shoei and the other secret guards couldn't help but cover their faces with their hands and laugh in their hearts. Oh my god, this is the crown princess with good psychological endurance. Without another word, the little crown princess smacked Shintu Jing's head with her ferrule until it bled. Her bright eyes were tainted with a trace of fury, and she kicked Shintu Jing from time to time as she fought. These people actually dared to backstab her and imitate her. They must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's gall to create a large batch of imitations of Sir Jojo. Unlike the 100 or so golem jajos that old fellow Tian Tuzi created, they were cute and harmless and could even command them to work at will. These lilies were all things that had been forcibly distorted and created by someone. According to Duan, once Lily completely died, the puppeteer behind her would use a secret puppet technique to continue controlling her. Arbor pulled up Shintu Jing, who was sprawled on the ground. Chapter 4966. Just thinking about it made her feel extremely disgusted. These people from the state of Daluo who indulged in the wildest fantasies actually concocted a scheme where one person substituted the other for the other. Unfortunately, their intelligence didn't seem to be enough. Otherwise, this state preceptor Shintu wouldn't have foolishly bumped into her, the person in question. No wonder she looked constipated and guilty when she saw her just now. It turned out that she discovered the subject of the experiment had appeared in front of her. How could Shintu Jing know that the little stoic was silently cursing? If she knew, she would definitely cry out for injustice. She was simply unlucky to the extreme during this period of time. Speaking of which, her unlucky experience started when she found Sangzhou's ruler. First, she destroyed one of her doppelgangers in the hands of Sangzhou's ruler. Then, Ming Province's crown prince closed the door and beat her like a dog, hunting her down in the entire city. Shintu Jing was utterly helpless and could only use the fraudulent transportation talisman matrix to transport herself out of the sealed Great Yong City. In the end, something even more fraudulent happened. The transportation talisman matrix almost failed. She didn't know what method that Ming Province's crown prince used. After several failed transmissions, she was so desperate that she used up all the transportation talisman matrices around her. And so something even more ridiculous was about to happen. This non-directional transportation talisman matrix transported her to the Sea of Forgetfulness. As soon as she came out of the transportation talisman matrix, she encountered a large corpse-devouring shark. After a desperate struggle, Shintu Jing, who barely escaped death, fainted in the Sea of Forgetfulness due to exhaustion. Thus, she floated up and down, floated to the subject of the experiment, Arbor. She didn't know if she should say that her luck was good or bad. She had been unconscious for more than 2 hours. Although she had already used a defensive talisman matrix on herself before she fainted, fortunately, she still didn't encounter that corpse-devouring shark. Otherwise, who knew if she would be in the shark's stomach right now? Arbor gazed coldly at third state preceptor Shintu Jing in front of him. This beautiful state preceptor of the state of Daluo was currently staring back at him stubbornly with a stiff neck. Arbor felt incredibly vexed when he saw her and directly slapped her face with his ferrule. He shouted coldly, "Keep looking and I'll gouge out your eyeballs." Shintu Jing let out a miserable cry. At this moment, her face was already incomparably wretched. After going through the little stoic's rough beating, what bullshit beautiful preceptor, her face was completely different from the word beauty. Speak. Where are the rest of those disgusting imitations that you guys collected? Upon hearing Duan Yu's words, these replicas did not seem to have the slightest intention of refuting. Instead, they were very proud and even quite happy to become such a substitute. Wherever that scumbag went, he would be a scumbag. Arbor pulled Shintu Jing up and grabbed her by the neck. Don't think I'll look up to you if you don't say anything. That won't work on me. Arbor coldly said. Search her soul. My knockoff tower of punishment will allow her to slowly enjoy the rest of her life. Arbor spoke word by word in a leisurely manner. However, Shintu Jing could not help but tremble all over as she looked at her in terror. In reality, she didn't understand what Arbor meant by the knockoff tower of punishment, but she just couldn't help being abnormally alarmed. It's useless even if you search my soul. Once my soul suffers from external pressure, it'll become an autonomous soul and explode. So you won't be able to obtain any useful information. Duan Yu raised his hand to suppress her. Then explode. Chapter 4967. Shintu Jing's eyes widened in horror, and she turned to Duan Yu in shock. This man actually sentenced her, Shintu Jing, to death without a second word. No, you can't search my soul. Please stop. Shintu Jing couldn't resist begging for mercy. I can say anything. I will say everything I know. There are many things that can't be learned through a soul search. Duan Yu pressed his hand on Shintu Jing's head and asked apathetically, Oh? There are things that can't be learned through a soul search. Yes. I don't dare to deceive your excellency. Shintu Jing hastily shouted, This one's divine sense was once blocked by a defensive barrier set up by the state preceptor. Although it won't cause a soul explosion, but once that defensive barrier detects an external force invading my conscious, it will directly destroy my consciousness. At this point, Shintu Jing couldn't help but shudder violently. Before your excellency completes the soul search, I will become an idiot. You won't be able to obtain any useful information. This was truly a bit interesting. Duan Yu swept an icy glance at Shintu Jing and slowly put his hand down. He said with a smile, I'll believe you for the time being. Tell me everything you know. Shintu Jing hastily exhaled deeply and nodded repeatedly. I don't dare to deceive your excellency. This LoveLore project has already been in operation for more than half a year. LoveLore 0 is the most perfect imitation that the state preceptor created. At this point, Shintu Jing couldn't help but glance at the young crown princess with a complicated expression. Seeing the latter's extremely indifferent expression, Shintu Jing sighed and said, I originally thought that LoveLore 0 was truly a flawless creation. Who knew after seeing the crown princess with my own eyes? Only then did I realize that no one in this world could possibly replace you. No one would be able to keep up with this #1 paralyzed face of yours. As you know, Your Majesty, LoveLore 9 has already been personally executed by you. As for LoveLore 5, she was also executed by the Crown Prince of Ming Province in Great Yong City. The remaining lilies, except for 0, should all be in the Pingjin Prairies territory of the Kingdom of Daluo. Didn't His Majesty already send people to clean them up? Shintu Jing stole a glance at Duan Yu before taking a deep breath and saying, that perfect work of art, LoveLore 0, reportedly also came to the River of Forgetfulness a while ago. Second State Preceptor Shen Nangui brought her along with him. As for where they are going, I truly don't know the specifics. The surroundings of the state of Luo's territory are all man-eating black swamps. How did you pass through these black swamps? Duan Yu asked coldly. Shintu Jing answered honestly. Our tribe has a large mechanical turtle that can pass through the black swamp unimpeded. Even if an ordinary person were to use a defensive shield, it would be very difficult for them to stay in the black swamp for more than an hour without being disturbed by the poison bugs and poison ants. Arbor's eyes lit up. He stroked his slightly warm abdomen and asked, "Is it fun?" Strangely, while Sir Jojo was interested, he could feel that baby Emo seemed to be interested in this mechanical turtle as well. This must be the connection between mother and son. Sir Jojo thought, if Jojo's Lotus knew about this, she would definitely be jealous. Lily, her number 0, came to the river of forgetfulness. Duan Yu's lips were tinged with an extremely faint sneer. Oh. Still not giving up on finding a partner. Chapter 4968. What? This time, the one you want to collaborate with is the current master of the Forgetful River tribe. That demonic cult master Ding Yun. Shintu Jing shook her head frantically and hastily said, "I don't know. I truly don't know where Second State Preceptor Shin Nangue will take Lily, number 02. Your Majesty, please judge clearly." Shintu Jing said in a fluster, "This humble one's every word is the truth. I have absolutely no intention of deceiving your Majesty." She had only interacted with Duan Yu once. But this time, she had buried one of her clones, and even Lily, number 9, was completely destroyed. She shouldn't continue courting death in front of such a vicious and merciless person. Otherwise she would probably die without a burial ground. Shintu Jing took a deep breath and did her best to look at Arbor and Duan Yu with eyes full of sincerity. Arbor swept her a glance. "Throw her into the knockoff pagoda of punishments." Duan Yu's mouth twitched, and he turned back to secretly glance at the little stoic. Even when the little stoic was angry, she was still a bit adorable, especially when she kept talking about the knockoff pagoda of punishments. 2 slender tree branches poked out from under her sleeves and coiled around the horrified Shintu Jing's arm. I really have to say everything. I already told you everything I know." What else do you want?" Shintu Jing shrieked in terror. I swear, I dare to swear an unbreakable heavenly Tao blood oath. Everything I said is true. Absolutely not a single word of falsehood. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at Shintu Jing and allowed the sapling Chocho to drag her into the knockoff pagoda of punishments. Chocho called out crisply, Master, can you not say knockoff next time?" Although their pagoda of punishments was indeed a knockoff, it was fine as long as it was easy to use. The authentic pagoda of punishments has 17 floors, but yours has 12 floors. If you don't make a knockoff, who will? Arbor pursed his lips and muttered softly. Master, Chocho's voice reverberated in her ears. They can also strengthen the Tower of Punishment and make it taller. It can be repaired to the height of 17 floors. Don't waste your energy. A replica would always be a replica no matter how much it was repaired, it would never become the real Tower of Punishment. Chocho angrily threw Shintu Jing into the first level of the knockoff Tower of Punishment. Shintu Jing had just entered when she felt her entire body being pulled over uncontrollably by a force. She immediately let out a shriek. Suddenly, several iron chains fell from above her head and bound her tightly. Jojo, you think she's lying? Duan Yu asked in confusion. Arbor shook his head. I don't think he's lying. Whether a person was telling the truth or not, one could tell by looking at her eyes and subtle expressions. Just now, Shintu Jing had dared to look back at her while speaking, and she hadn't spoken slowly either. She didn't seem to be thinking as she spoke. Basically, as she had said, she would tell him everything she knew. The corner of Duan Yu's eyes silently twitched. He coughed lightly and asked, Then why did you drag her into the Tower of Punishment? Oh, that tower has been empty for a while, and no one can throw it in. Let her try. Duan Yu was speechless. It seemed like this Shintu Jing was merely an unlucky person trying out the tower. Sir Jojo didn't expect him to remember that there was such a character in the Tower of Punishment after throwing her in now. Chapter 4969. Duan Yu didn't want to say anything more about this unlucky Shintu Jing. But since this was Sir Jojo's decision, Duan Yu naturally supported it to the end. Let's see if we can dig out any useful information from this Shintu Jing, Arbor said seriously. What the heck is this kingdom of Daluo up to? Arbor said coldly with a frown, I want to make a trip to the Pingjin Prairie and meet that king of the kingdom of Daluo. Duan Yu hastily shook his head. With your current condition, it's not suitable for you to go to a place like the Pingjin Prairie where the terrain and environment are extremely vile. Arbor thought about it and agreed. She quickly nodded and said, all right, then help me capture their state preceptor and whatnot. She wanted to properly investigate just who dared to be so audacious as to create so many Liliers to trap her. Oh wait, it should be to trap Mo Lien. Humph. Jojo's Lien was truly a pig's head. Jojo was about to be drowned in counterfeits, yet he was still busy counting mushrooms in some nook and cranny. Duan Yu nodded while holding back his laughter. He said helplessly, okay. I'll listen to you. Obediently return to Tsang province with me in a few days. We'll talk about the rest later. This matter is very fishy and needs to be thoroughly investigated. Look at this little fellow. She was so restless even when she was pregnant. She kept moving around and jumping around all day, which made him a bit flustered. Arbor put on an unperturbed expression and patted his arm. Don't worry, my body is very healthy. What a joke. She was a great pill alchemist. It would be hilarious if she couldn't even take care of her own body. She was most aware of her own body's condition. If it weren't for her little stoic face that was always expressionless, she might have been grinning from ear to ear already. This baby in her belly was very likely to be a peerless oddball. When she was pregnant, she didn't feel anything. She didn't feel sleepy or nauseous. She didn't feel dizzy or hot or anything. He would only give her guidance when he was picky about food. In addition, when he encountered something good, he probably would also give her guidance. For example, when she encountered the light congealing mirror last time, she clearly felt baby's abnormal movements. This little weirdo probably took after his father, Arbor thought. He was a foodie and liked to collect all kinds of good things. In the future, when he grew up, he would not be taken advantage of. He was a shrewd character. As Lady Xiqiao thought about this, her small hand couldn't help but rub her belly. As if he could feel her caress, his stomach started to heat up. Jojo. Duan Yu couldn't resist glancing at her when he saw her in a daze. Qiao Mu coughed lightly and patted her stomach in all seriousness. Hemichim, it's fine. Duan Yu, don't worry for nothing, my body is fine. After eating and sleeping well, he felt as if his entire body was filled with inexhaustible strength. With a single punch, it wouldn't be surprising if he could split mountains and rivers. Who else could be as strong as her when they were pregnant? Jojo, Sama was indeed different. Duan Yu curled his lips. Jojo, are you praising yourself in your mind? Who said that? Qiao Mu cast Duan Yu a sidelong glance and harumphed. She then pattered forward with small steps. If you walk any further, you'll fall into the sea. Duan Yu couldn't help but follow from the bow of the ship. I've deployed an extra 1,000 men. We'll search the nearby waters for another 2 days. Arbor turned his head away with a huff. You're the one who's looking for him. Okay, I miss him. Duan Yu sighed helplessly. Chapter 4970. Jojo was truly too tsundere. Just looking at him gave people a headache. Arbor snuck a glance at Duan Yu and harumphed. All right then, I'll search for him for 2 more days on your account. Duan Yu nodded in exasperation. Emichim. After searching for so long without any sign of Mo Lien, the little emperor was unhappy. Of course, it was more likely that he was worried. Don't look at how this little thing's face was stoic and unperturbed. Perhaps her mind was full of twists and turns, simulating all kinds of bad things and secretly worrying herself to death. She really was a silly girl. Did she think that he wouldn't know her thoughts if she didn't say anything? Duan Yu sighed softly and shook his head. I'm not busy. Actually, it's fine to search more. Behind him, Xiaoyi rolled his eyes in exasperation. Left Prime Minister Wu Yong had sent dozens of urgent letters, but His Majesty turned a blind eye to them and said he wasn't busy. Seriously enough. In comparison, the Crown Princess, the little stoic, seemed to be more reliable than His Majesty. At least she set a deadline, unlike His Majesty who was unreliable. For the sake of the divine province's Crown Prince wait. Could it be that His Majesty was so persistent in searching for the divine province's Crown Prince because Duan Yu turned around and saw Xiaoyi's constipated expression. He was currently looking at him strangely, and his handsome face was a bit red from holding back his words. If you have something to say, just say it. Why are you holding it in? Duan Yu was speechless. Presumably, he didn't have anything to say. He was just helping Prime Minister Wu urge him to hurry back to the capital. Did he have to hold it in like that? Your Majesty, you don't have improper thoughts about the divine province's crown prince, right? After Xiaoyi said this, Wu felt something fly past his eyes. It perfectly rose into the air with a whoosh before landing back into the sea with an extremely dashing bang. Duan Yu pulled back a leg and expressionlessly flicked his sleeve. He pulled over the dumbfounded Jojo and coughed lightly. Ignore him. His brain isn't working well. However, it was as if Arbor had a new train of thought. He looked at Duan Yu strangely before glancing at the hidden guards who were like wooden stakes prodding him. I feel that Xiaoyi is a warrior who dares to speak the truth. Everyone was speechless. You shouldn't have kicked him. Instead, you should have greatly praised him. Arbor said with a straight face, these days, there aren't many people who dare to be so impudent and outspoken in front of their superiors. That's right, people who were impudent and outspoken were basically buried with grass half the height of a person. Duan Yu looked in shock at Sir Jojo, who had leaped onto the air transportation spirit artifact. He turned to ask Wui, who was standing upright beside him, what does Jojo mean by this? It's exactly what your Majesty is thinking. Wu Yi resisted the urge to burst into laughter and said with a serious expression. Duan Yu, Jojo, come back. It's not what you think. Fuck, how could he have any thoughts about Emolien? It was enough for him to see that guy. 2 days later Duan Yu's group rode the air transportation spirit artifact in the direction of Tsang province. Sir Jojo couldn't conceal the disappointment on his face, but he tried his best to restrain himself and not show it. No matter how the eloquent little servants tried to coax him into talking, Jojo was dispirited. An hour after the group left, the tranquil seawater suddenly seemed to be boiling, and a whirlpool started to swirl from the bottom. Crash! After a loud sound, a huge wave rolled down and almost overturned a merchant ship that was coming towards them. Chapter 4971. Ah! Someone on the boat suddenly screamed. A young woman, who was sitting at the bow of the boat and sipping tea, couldn't help but scream. She was just sitting there, admiring the beautiful scenery of the sea. In the end, she was drenched by the huge waves. Her face immediately darkened. Be careful. A strong man with a short black beard suddenly rushed out from the side and blocked the young woman with his sword. He quickly rushed toward the strange beast opposite him with divine power. It had 6 legs and 4 wings, and its whole body was wrapped in flames. The giant beast's body was as strong as a small hill, towering in front of everyone. This frightening size was enough to make one shiver in fear. The strong man's face showed a trace of shock. He muttered something and waved his hand, and a long sword appeared in his hand. He swung his sword horizontally. The sword light carried divine power and rushed toward the giant beast that was charging toward him. However, it was like an ant trying to shake a tree. This little bit of power was insignificant in front of the giant beast. The giant beast flipped up from the water and tore the waves in front of it with its claws. With a splash, the water split from the middle, and the whole boat was torn apart by its claws. The woman in the green gauze couldn't help but scream again. She was slapped into the water by the huge waves. The strong man with a short black beard opened his eyes wide and shouted, "Miss!" He quickly jumped into the water to save the young woman. Who knew that the giant beast would flip back and forth in the water, and huge waves would roll over? The splashing sound of the water was abnormal. The boatmen who fell into the water screamed in fear. They hurriedly climbed into the water, trying to get away from the giant beast as soon as possible. However, they were so weak. The moment the giant beast flipped in the water, it opened its mouth and sucked several boatmen to its mouth, and tore them apart effortlessly with its claws. The woman in the green gauze was soaked in the water, and her face was a little distorted from fear. She panicked and slapped the water surface, kicking her legs like a dog. She repeatedly screamed, "Mr. Shin, Mr. Shin!" The robust man with a short black beard became a little anxious. He jumped out of the water in a hurry. Then, he took a few steps in the air, and arrived beside the green-robed woman. Then, he pulled her out of the water. The man brought the girl up into the air and quickly bounced up. However, in the next second, a huge wave came crashing down on them again, slamming them back into the sea. The angry roar of the giant beast echoed in his ears. The green-robed woman turned her head to take a look and was so shocked that her jaw almost fell to the ground. He was almost within reach of the giant beast. As soon as she looked up, she could see the giant beast's huge face wrapped in flames. Its face was ferocious and its eyes were like copper bells. The green-robed woman shuddered. She couldn't help but shiver. "Let's go." The man made a prompt decision and pulled the girl out of the water again. "Mr. Shin, we crash." A few huge waves slammed heavily on the top of their heads. The two unlucky ones had no way to resist this overwhelming force, and were heavily smashed into the bottom of the water by the huge waves. The green-robed woman even gulped down a few mouthfuls of water. She suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. "Damn it!" The robust man cursed in a low voice, and his face became abnormally ugly. He didn't expect that he would encounter such a crisis on this trip to the Sea of Forgetfulness. He looked up and saw that several boatmen had died in this disaster. Chapter 4972. The dozen or so bodyguards he brought with him were either dead or injured at this time. Almost all of them were consumed by this giant beast. The man with a short black beard grits his teeth and takes out a small exquisite pagoda from his sleeve. He says in a deep voice, "Let's hide in this defensive artifact first." The woman in green muslin hurriedly nods and urges, "Mr. Shin, hurry, hurry." As long as they enter this defensive artifact, they can resist 1 or 2 attacks. The woman in green muslin raises her head and looks at the man in front of her with a pair of beautiful almond eyes full of expectation. Shin Nangue can't help but reach out and touch the woman's delicate and white cheeks. He smiles slightly and says, "Don't be afraid, we won't." Whoosh! The surging waves make Shin Nangue completely shut up. He hurriedly throws out the small pagoda in his hand. The two figures suddenly disappear in the sea. In the rippling sea, a small exquisite pagoda the size of a palm is bobbing up and down along with the waves. Suddenly, it is heavily slapped into the blue sea by a giant beast's claw. Ao, ao, ao. The giant beast roars angrily twice. Using its two claws, it tosses the small pagoda that is emitting a faint halo back and forth as if playing with it. One moment it is tossed into the air, the next moment it is slapped into the bottom of the sea. It goes back and forth many times, making Shen Nangui in the exquisite pagoda feel very uncomfortable. Although this exquisite pagoda is a defensive artifact, the space inside is extremely small. The two of them are standing close to each other. At this moment, they are miserable. The same beast outside was treating it like a toy, using its claws to pull it around. The entire small pagoda would shake and fall from time to time. The two of them were stuck in this pagoda, and following the constant shaking back and forth, they were about to vomit from it. Paw! The palm-sized face of the woman in green muslin hangs a trace of panic and fear. You hear something. What sound? Shen Nangui's face changes again and again. He naturally heard it too. This subtle sound seems to be the sound of the defensive artifact cracking. The two of them look up. Sure enough, they see a trace of light coming in from the outside. The top of the pagoda seems to have a tiny crack, and now this crack seems to be expanding infinitely after being slapped by the beast's claws. Shen Nangui cried bitterly in his heart. In his entire life, he had never seen a giant beast with such great strength. With his bare hands, no, with his bare claws, he was able to destroy a defensive divine artifact that he had painstakingly built with a lot of manpower, energy, and refining materials that he had painstakingly built for months. Shen Nangui's heart ached so much that he almost wanted to vomit blood. However, at this moment, he could only hide in this small pagoda with his tail between his legs. I'm fine. Shen Nangui, who was once again flipped upside down by the beast's claws, comforted the pale girl in green gauze in his arms. We'll be fine. This defensive divine artifact won't shatter so easily. It will take at least 2 to 4 hours for this defensive divine artifact to completely break apart. All we have to do is wait for this beast to get impatient and continue to slap it. Then, we'll be saved. Don't worry. Shen Nangui comforted the woman in green. He didn't know if he was comforting her or comforting himself. As soon as he finished speaking, a few extremely frightening caw sounds came from the top of the tower. The two of them's face turned very pale. They looked at each other and saw a trace of panic in each other's eyes. Chapter 4973. Shen Nangui was speechless. He did not expect to be slapped in the face by the gigantic beast as soon as he finished speaking. He had just assured the lady in green that this defensive divine weapon could last for another 2 hours. Who knew now? It seemed that it could not even last 3 minutes. Crack! 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 The sound of something breaking was touching the two people's twitching nerves. In a flash, the entire pagoda suddenly cracked. 4 to 5 rays of light penetrated the pagoda from above and around the pagoda. The entire exquisite pagoda had completely cracked open. At the same time, the gigantic beast seemed to be unable to bear the unusual torment in its stomach. It suddenly opened its mouth and roared. A few shining light balls flew out of its mouth. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a few people wrapped in a defensive divine weapon that flew out from within. Quick! The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal hurriedly urged. Mo Lien, whose expression was cold, turned around and took out a small mirror that was filled with an ancient aura from her sleeve. She shone the mirror at the gigantic beast opposite her. Blinding rays of light converged into innumerable invisible threads that violently flung onto the gigantic beast's body. Seeing that the light-congealing mirror had jumped out to trap him again, Dun gritted his teeth in hatred. He could not help but roar angrily as he shook his body, trying to get rid of the threads on his body. The rays of light converged by the light-congealing mirror wound around Dun's body and bound him tightly. No matter how much Dun roared, he could not break free from the bindings. Mo Lien suddenly turned around and raised her hand. The fragments of the exquisite pagoda flew into her palm piece by piece. She kept all of them in a storage talisman. She did not expect to pick up so many excellent god-level crafting materials on the first day she came out. She had to admit that her luck was really superb. Prince Mo felt a little elated, but he quickly focused all his attention on the gigantic beast of Dun. This gigantic beast's willpower was really stubborn. They had been punching and kicking in its stomach for so long before it could not bear the pain and let them out. Even with the light-congealing mirror, it was very troublesome to completely seal it. No wonder the heavenly axiom wanted to seal it in the abyss at all costs. Releasing it would be a great disaster indeed. Mo Lien raised her hand and wiped her finger. A line of blood spilled out. The light-congealing mirror suddenly emitted a dazzling light that was comparable to the brilliance of the sun and the moon. With a whoosh, it leaped into the air. The entire mirror suddenly expanded by dozens of feet, and became 3 to 5 times fatter. The power of the light completely suppressed the chaos beast. Soon, Mo Lien and He Chen's Saint energy landed on the giant beast and bounced the condensing light mirror over. With the help of the powerful holy light emitted by the condensing mirror, Mo Lien quickly sealed the chaos beast. But even so, Prince Mo's eyes were not calm and relaxed. He frowned slightly and looked down at the condensing light mirror in his hand. How long can this power be sealed? Clearly, the condensing mirror's holy light had a natural suppressive effect on Chaos' sacred beasts. However, the Chaos beast was simply too powerful. It would be difficult for it not to charge out of the light-condensing mirror again. Even if Mo Lien had placed a few more confinement seals on the condensing mirror, there was still no guarantee that the Chaos beast would not be able to charge out. He Chen sighed softly. It seems that this seal is only temporary. If they could not think of a good way to get the best of both worlds, the Chaos Beast might come out to harm the world again after a while. At this moment, a bald little boy with a photon brain jumped out from the side. Chapter 4974. Don't kill it. Dun isn't usually this anxious and violent. It's mainly because it has been locked up for too long, so it's a little irritable. This is easy to understand, isn't it? Yuan Shichen chuckled, understand my ass. An irritable and violent creature opened its mouth and swallowed them all. Fortunately, he and Mo Lien's group were tough, so they weren't chewed up. Otherwise, who could they find to reason with at this moment? It's definitely not like this usually. Congealing Mirror said to Mo Lien and the rest with a straight face. You guys were already too much when you destroyed everything in its stomach. Now that it's been sealed, don't hit it anymore, okay? Yuan Shichen couldn't help but roll his eyes. He thought, I didn't expect this small congealing mirror to be such a compassionate Virgin Mary. Mo Lien didn't say anything and stuck several sealing talismans on the surface of congealing mirror. Then, she turned to Yuan Shichen and said, set up an array and seal it in the abyss of the sea. Stop. Shen Wu suddenly blocked GC and the rest who were trying to sneak away with his sword. The natives of Sin Kingdom were only left with 3 melons and 2 dates. Other than GC who had lost her ears, there were 3 middle-aged and old men. All of them looked emaciated. When the sea breeze blew, they couldn't help but shiver. What else do you want? GC let out a shriek, her face contorted in anger. Although the people in front of her all revealed their original handsome faces. In GC's eyes, they were simply like ferocious-looking devils. How could a man who could cut off her ears for no reason be a kind person? Moreover, they could even seal a chaos beast again. How could a few repulsive people from Sin Kingdom be their match? They were not even enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Nothing. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal smiled coldly. Hand over a strand of your life soul, and I'll consider sparing your lives. GC and the other 3 men from Sin Kingdom widened their eyes at the same time. They shook their heads and took a few steps back. Unfortunately, their backs were soon covered by a thick, transparent barrier. It was only then that he realized that, at some point in time, someone had set up a barrier around him, trapping him completely. GC and the others had nowhere to run, and a bad premonition arose in their hearts. What are you going to do? GC found that her voice was trembling when she opened her mouth. Mo Lien ignored her. She turned to Yi Qin and said, "Let them go to the undersea abyss and continue watching the chaos." The faces of GC and the others instantly turned pale. "All right, go and contact Jojo. Leave these people to me." Just as the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal finished speaking, a few thuds could be heard. GC and the others trembled as they kneeled on the broken deck of the ship, their faces pale. "Sirs, please don't do this." On the other side, the bald 3-year-old child was also crying loudly as he hung from the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's leg like a pendant. He shouted loudly, "No, don't throw Lord Guangguang into the pit at the bottom of the sea again. What are you trying to do? Master Guangguang finally came out, and you want to throw Master Guangguang in again? No. No, no." Chapter 4975. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal shook his long leg, wanting to throw away the pendant clinging to his leg. Unfortunately, little Congealing Mirror's short limbs had great strength. This little fellow clung to his leg tightly and refused to let go. It was as if it had grown on his leg and could not be moved at all. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal twitched his mouth speechlessly. All right. Come down first and we'll talk." "I won't. You bad people want to throw Lord Guangguang heartlessly into the seabed abyss, that lousy place where birds don't shit and chickens don't lay eggs. You want Lord Guangguang to continue lying at the bottom of the cold sea for millions of years. Do you think I'm stupid? I won't let go even if I die." On the other side, Mo Lien ignored the others and floated above the river of forgetfulness. She took out a communication jade talisman from her sleeve and frowned as she stared at it for a while. What was going on? There was no response from the communication jade talisman. He turned his head and looked at the speechless Yi Qin. "Try using your communication jade talisman." "You don't have to try." Lord Guangguang pouted and said weakly, "Earlier when you ganged up on Dun Dun, I blocked all of your divine senses. I'm afraid you won't be able to open your inner worlds for a while." Mo Lien, Yi Qin, and the others all glared at this little brat. I didn't do it on purpose." Lord Guangguang shouted stubbornly. How would I know? I thought you were going to kill Dun Dun. Although Dun Dun and I don't have much of a friendship, but we've been together for more than 1,000 years. No feelings, but there are feelings of companionship. Lord Guangguang hung pitifully on Yi Qin's leg and clung to his robe tightly. It wailed, "Don't throw us into the seabed abyss. We don't want to stay in the seabed abyss anymore. What do you know? If Dun Dun breaks out of the seal again, can you still suppress it?" Mo Lien said coldly. "No, it won't. It won't." Congealing Mirror shook its bald head vigorously and shouted, "I swear. I swear in the name of the heavenly Tao. Dun Dun's nature is still very kind. It's just that sometimes it's too lonely, that's why it wants to come out. Zhuolan couldn't help but chuckle. He shook his snake tail and rolled his eyes. It's not like you didn't notice how many people it bit to death when it came out. But those people from the evil kingdom aren't good people either. Sir Guangguang weakly defended himself. Moreover, my dun can be taught slowly. It's still young. It'll be sensible after being taught. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal had already taken out his communication jade talisman. He frowned and said, even if my spiritual consciousness is blocked, what does this have to do with the communication jade talisman? Why can't I even send a message? Lord Guangguang pursed his lips and smacked his lips as he said, don't you know? Lord Guangguang, can block everything. That's right, including spatial teleportation. You are by Lord Guangguang's side, you can't even use teleportation talismans. The message talisman is also useless. He-Chin glared angrily. He really wanted to beat this child to death. You are the artifact spirit of the ancient sacred artifact, Congealing Mirror. Legend has it that you have the ability to unlock the Great Godlock Array. Why can't you unlock the shield? Seeing that the masters beside him were so angry that they were about to beat the child, Shenwu hurriedly went forward and asked, wanting to help Lord Guangguang out of this predicament. Congealing Mirror had a weak expression on its face. Chapter 4976. Prince Mo's expression froze. How can we break it? 7 days later, it will naturally be broken. Mo Lian waved her hand, and Congealing Mirror hugged Yuan Shichen's thigh, crying out with a strong desire to live. Lord Light didn't do it on purpose. It's you fierce people who suddenly came here shouting to kill. Lord Light only wanted to protect himself. That was why he secretly set up the spirit lock shield. Was it his fault? He didn't want to do this, but these people in front of him didn't look like they were to be trifled with. It was scary. Yuan Shichen was speechless. He raised his hand to persuade Mo Lian. It's useless even if you throw him into the sea now. How about this, let's bring Congealing Mirror to Jojo. Let Jojo bring them into the star domain. Yuan Shichen winked at Mo Lian. Mo Lian instantly understood. No matter how powerful chaos was, as long as it entered Jojo's star domain, it would have to acknowledge Jojo as its master. It wouldn't be able to do much. That seemed to be good too. Looking at Congealing Mirror's lack of intelligence, it was definitely not Jojo's match. When the time came, wouldn't it be easy for Lord Jojo to capture it? Who is Jojo? Where are you taking us? Congealing Mirror asked in a daze. Mo Lian glanced at it coldly. Congealing Mirror quivered. It was so scared that it crawled onto Yuan Shichen's thigh, hugging his leg and crying out. I was just asking. Can't I just ask? Mo Lian turned her head, her gaze landing coldly on GC and the rest. At this moment, GC, Elder Zhou, and the other 3 citizens of Sin Kingdom had already pulled out a strand of their soul, trembling as they offered it. Master, please spare our lives. If you have any orders in the future, we will not disobey. Sirs, please don't drive us back into the bottomless abyss. After saying this, Old Zhou and the other 2 subjects of the Kingdom of Sin, along with great suzerain GC, repeatedly kowtowed to Mo Lian, Shichen, and the others, earnestly begging for mercy. Now, they were really scared to death. Was there really such a cold and heartless person in this world? With great difficulty, they were finally able to climb out of the gloomy and narrow underwater abyss, only to see the sunlight for a few minutes. These people wanted to chase them down to the bottom of the abyss again, to guard the cold bottom of the abyss, to guard the darkness. What a cruel heart. Mo Lian looked at them coldly. After thinking for a while, she frowned and looked at Heartwarming. Zhuolan couldn't help but interrupt, actually, their kung fu is a so-so. It's fine to keep them to run errands or something. Humph, Mo Lien sneered, I didn't expect that a cowardly little snake like you, who ran away at the sight of danger, would have compassion overflowing one day. What? Zhuolan glared angrily, smoke coming out of his nostrils, who's a coward? You, Junior, don't speak if you don't know how to speak. Go to the underwater abyss. What? The faces of the small condensing mirror and the people of Sin Kingdom instantly turned pale. They had already begged for mercy to this extent. This heartless man, could it be that he still wants to seal them in the underwater abyss? Seeing their bitter and sorrowful expressions, Yuan Shichin could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth and explain, let's go and see if Qiao Qiao is still here. Chapter 4977. Previously, they were sucked into the chaos beast's stomach and rushed out of the abyss. They didn't know how many nautical miles they had traveled in the deep sea. Now, they were no longer near the abyss. Returning to the abyss wasn't to throw them in, but to see if the little stoic was still guarding there and hadn't left. Hu Jinchen patted Mo Lien. We'll wait another 7 days at most. As long as they received news of Jojo, they would rush over even if they had to travel day and night. The Holy Spirit of the condensing mirror patted its chest and muttered to itself, as long as we don't throw Sir Guangguang into the abyss. Huala, huala. After several sounds of water splashing, several disheveled people scuttled out of the sea. The woman in green gauze sighed in relief when she saw the tranquil surface of the sea. On the other hand, Shen Nangui's expression was very unsightly. He looked around and said coldly, friends, shouldn't you return something that belongs to someone else? Where's that large beast the size of a small mountain? The woman in green gauze looked around and asked in terror, could it be that that thing is your mount? If it was really their mounts, then they should really be made to pay for it. Not only did this large beast destroy their entire ship, but it also gave her such a huge fright. Before the woman could finish retorting, her voice gradually lowered. Her eyes were practically shining as she looked in the direction of Mo Lien, Hu Jinchen, and the others. The young sirs were all as handsome as gods. They were simply celestial beings at first sight. Mo Lien swept an indifferent glance over, and her gaze suddenly froze. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was just about to say with a smile, who goes there, when his voice suddenly paused, and he looked at the woman in green gauze with knitted brows. The woman in green gauze didn't think that death was imminent. She revealed an innocent smile and giggled. This is our kingdom of Doro's second state preceptor, Shen Nangue. The woman had just finished speaking when she felt a tremendous force assault her. She instantly cried out in alarm, and her feet were suspended in the air as she flew forward involuntarily. Shen Nangui's hand was as fast as lightning. He reached out and grabbed her shoulder, firmly anchoring her body to a dilapidated plank of the ship. Who would have thought that another wooden vine would attack from the side and suddenly wrap around his wrist? With a forceful tug, Shen Nangue could only retract his hand in pain. He could only watch helplessly as the woman he had pressed against the deck of the boat cried out in alarm. Her body was lifted into the air, and she couldn't help but fall to the opposite side. Bang! The woman fell into the sea and swallowed 2 mouthfuls of salty seawater. Helplessly, she poked her head out of the sea and looked at Mo Lien, who was standing above her, with a look of inexplicable horror. She was a little confused and did not understand what was going on. Speaking of which, she had never met these handsome men before. Why would they? Attacking a weak girl like her as soon as they met. What kind of thing are you? Mo Lien's voice was as if he had been fished out from an ice cellar, so cold that there wasn't the slightest bit of warmth. He could tell at a glance that this woman's appearance was very similar to her Jojo. No, it couldn't be said that they were similar. Such a lowly wretch wasn't even fit to carry his JoJo's shoes. Although this woman in front of him looked somewhat similar to JoJo, her entire face looked rather uncoordinated. It gave people the feeling that it was a fake face. It was as if her original face was covered with a seamless and well-made human skin mask. At first glance, she really could be intimidated. Chapter 4978. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at the girl coldly and said with some doubt in his eyes, "She doesn't look like a human skin mask." What was going on? Why would a girl who deliberately put on a fake face and pretend to be JoJo appear in the sea of forgetfulness? There was definitely something fishy about this. He had to take these people down and interrogate them. Who are you? Why are you suddenly attacking others? Shen Nangue was furious and could not help but curse. You and I don't know each other, have never met before. Why are you suddenly attacking? Why? When he was pulled by the wooden vines, his palm was almost broken. The pain was unbearable and he could not help but let go of Lily Zero. Now that he saw Lily Zero fall into the sea in a sorry state, Shen Nangue was furious. These young people were too presumptuous. Why did they attack them the moment they arrived? Previously, it was clearly the giant beasts that they had attracted to harm them. They had even destroyed their ships for no reason. Now, they actually dared to attack them first. This was outrageous. The more Shen Nangue thought about it, the angrier he became. He glared at Mo Lien and the others. However, they did not give him any explanation. One of the young men in a black shirt raised his hand and said, "Capture them first." Immediately, 3 burly men and a woman wrapped in a flowery headscarf pounced in their direction. Shen Nangue was shocked and quickly activated his defensive shield. Several attacks had already landed on his body with a loud bang. The 4 people who attacked him were very strong. They were all above Divine Realm level 10 and were almost on par with Shen Nangue. Therefore, Shen Nangue, who was outnumbered, was unlucky. The girl with the flowery headscarf was GC. After she lost her ears, she did not look beautiful. She could only take a piece of flowery headscarf and wrap herself up. Now, the sound seemed to be coming from afar. She could hear it, but it was not clear. She saw old Zhou and the other 2 move, so she quickly followed to help capture them. After all, she had just recognized Mo Lien as her master. Naturally, she had to perform well in front of her master. In less than a few minutes, Shen Nangue was pressed down by Zhou on his shoulder, and he knelt on one knee on the deck. With this press, the wooden board sank into the water. Half of Shen Nangue's leg was submerged in the water, making him look extremely miserable. At this time, Lily Zero, who had fallen into the sea, was pulled over by Shenwu and Snake Man again and thrown onto another broken wooden board. The plank sank, and Lily Zero almost slipped off the plank and fell into the salty sea again. She widened her eyes in horror and looked at Mo Lien, He Chen, and the others with a sorrowful expression. Her voice trembled with a trace of fear. Sirs, your skills are extraordinary. Why must you make things difficult for a weak woman like me? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was enraged. He raised his hand and slapped her across the face. Because she used too much force, the woman's neck bone was almost broken. She could even hear the sound of her neck bone cracking. Damn wretch. How dare he use a face that resembles JoJo's to make such a disgusting expression? It was too painful to look at. Drag him over. Mo Lien's voice was extremely cold, and a trace of coldness flashed through her phoenix eyes. Lily Zero couldn't help but tremble. Chapter 4979. She widened her eyes in horror and exclaimed, what are you doing? What are you doing? Ah! Let go of me, you. Lily Zero was rudely thrown over and fell on the wooden board in a sorry state. Her legs were dragged in the water and her hands could only desperately hold on to the wooden board. Her face was filled with anxiety and she was completely confused. Are these people mentally ill? Otherwise, why would he suddenly deal such a fatal blow to her without distinguishing between right and wrong, beating and scolding her as soon as he saw her? Who did she offend? Speak, who are you? Mo Lien's voice was cold and his eyes were filled with a thick layer of killing intent. Congealing Mirror shrank to the side and did not dare to step forward. The low pressure emitted by this human was too intimidating. Even he, Lord Congealing Mirror, did not dare to make a sound and challenge that man's nerves that were on the verge of exploding. It was imaginable how miserable it was for Shenangue and Lily Zero to face this man's immense pressure. What a terrifying man. Lord Guangguang chose to keep his mouth shut and obediently squatted on the side to count mushrooms. He did not dare to make a ruckus. Lily Zero hastily looked up and just so happened to meet Mo Lien's phoenix eyes that were as serene as a cold pond. Her entire body shuddered involuntarily. This man's gaze was too eerie and terrifying. In that brief moment of eye contact, Lily Zero felt as if her heart had been frozen. That feeling of panic came from the bottom of her heart, making it impossible for her to escape. You already said it before. We are the kingdom of Daluo. Ah. Before Lily Zero could finish her sentence, she was slapped twice by Mo Lien. Her whole face was inexplicably slapped on the wooden board and soaked in the sea with gravity. She felt as if there was a heavy stone pressing down on her head. She suddenly felt that it was difficult to breathe. She struggled on the wooden plank with her arms and legs in a panic. Og. Lily Zero suddenly felt sad. Ever since she accepted the plan and was made into the most perfect Lily, she had always been raised like a princess. She had never suffered such pain and humiliation. She originally thought that such a beautiful face would bring her endless glory and hope. Who knew after half a year of transformation, she, who walked out of the kingdom of Daluo's territory, would be humiliated like this today. Lily Zero choked and coughed violently while crying. When she finally felt the pressure on her head lighten, her messy hair was lifted up by a force. She finally felt fresh air again. She desperately gasped for air and coughed until her lungs were about to explode. The man's cold voice rang in her ears. How disgusting. Turn your face away. Don't use that face to look at me again. Because of her anger, Lily Zero's eyes immediately turned red. Big drops of tears rolled down her cheeks. She didn't know what was going on. These people seemed to be complaining about her beautiful face. Why? This Lily Zero's IQ was obviously very low. Compared to her stupidity, second state preceptor Shenangue was the first to understand. His rat eyes could not help but flicker slightly. He arched his body and asked in a deep voice, "May I know your identity?" Impudent. Chapter 4980. Who allowed a bug like you to get up? A middle-aged man from the Kingdom of Sin slapped Shenangue's head without any explanation. Shenangue's legs went soft from the slap, and he fell back to his knees on the broken wooden board. Compared to Lily Shenangue was in no way inferior. The two of them did not look at the almanac before they went out, and now they ran into Mo Lien and He Chin. They were really unlucky. After they entered the river of forgetfulness, they had yet to find their true master, and they had already encountered these people in front of them who were completely unreasonable. As soon as they came up, they beat them to death. This was truly the case of dying before they could even begin their journey. They had 18 lifetimes of bad luck. Shenangue was so angry that he bit out a mouthful of blood. He opened his mouth but could not make a sound for a long time. Lily Zero, who was beside him, was already trembling in fear. She could not help but crawl on the wooden board, trying to pull her legs out of the water. However, no matter how hard she tried, half of her body was still submerged in the water. Her wet body was very sticky and uncomfortable. Look who's here. I was wondering why it was so lively here. So it's the Crown Prince of the Divine Province. TSK, sorry for not coming out to meet you. A mocking laughter came from afar and was carried by the wind into everyone's ears. Everyone was looking serious. When they heard the sound, they turned around and saw more than a dozen small ships, breaking through the wind and waves. They were moving very fast. Standing at the bow of the first ship was a tall and handsome young master in a green bamboo robe. His eyes were smiling as he looked in their direction, and the corners of his mouth held a faint sneer. When his gaze fell on Emolien, there was a hint of sharpness and a hint of mockery. He-Chin was slightly taken aback, and whispered to Emolien, "Why is that kid here?" Emolien also shook her head in confusion. In just half a month, Ding Yun seemed to be getting more arrogant and domineering, and he was even more of an eyesore. Look at his bluff, he's really a good-for-nothing. Those who come have bad intentions, and those who are kind won't come. He-Chin whispered with a smile, I feel that the way this kid looks at you is like looking at a dead person. He really wants to kill you. It's not like he's only been thinking about killing me for a day or two. Emolien snorted coldly and said indifferently. Let's see how capable he is, there's no need to say anything else. TSK, what is your highness doing? Ding Yun asked with a smile as he glanced at the disheveled woman sprawled on the wooden plank. At that time, the woman was lying on the wooden plank and had not turned her head, so he naturally could not see her face clearly. On the other hand, the robust man with the short black beard was forced to kneel on the wooden plank. Both of his legs were submerged in the water, and he looked even more embarrassed. Ding Yun curled his lips into a smile. Who is so bold as to provoke His Highness the Crown Prince's anger? Prince Mo looked at him coldly. Instead of answering, he asked, Why are you here? A short and thin elder stepped out from behind Ding Yun. His hawk-like gaze swept across the Crown Prince and the others, and he smiled sinisterly. Sect Master is already the master of the entire Forgetfulness River. Crown Prince of the Divine Prefecture, you'd better be more respectful when speaking to our master. When she said this, Emolien and He-Chin couldn't help but be taken aback. What was going on? They had only stayed in the undersea abyss for a month, and the Forgetfulness River's sky had changed. Ding Yun waved his hand with a smile. Leave. Chapter 4981. His eyes flashed as he stared at Prince Mo for a while. Finally, he couldn't help but laugh. The Crown Prince and the Venerable Immortal entered the abyss at the bottom of the sea. They came out so quickly. Look at how jealous you are. Before Emolien could say anything, the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't help but mock her. Why? Do you feel bad seeing us climb up from the bottom of the sea? You can't wait for us to live at the bottom of the sea forever. Ding Yun glanced at the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal with a grin. I can't wait for you to live together and never come out. What's with that look? The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal glanced at Emolien. Why are you talking to him? Emolien said expressionlessly. Take those two from the state of Daluo and let's go. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was speechless. Big brother, can I ask how we are going to leave now? In this vast sea, there are no boats and we can't enter the inner world. Are we supposed to swim to the shore or fly all the way back? Fuck, this is too much of a scam. Mo Lien threw him a look that said, "Are you stupid?" and silently took out a storage talisman from her pocket. "There's a boat." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's eyes instantly lit up. He looked at Prince Mo as if he was looking at his own brother. It had to be said, when Mo Lien became reliable, he really was especially reliable. "Last time in the Karst Cave, didn't you say that you wanted to learn from me and put more storage talismans and space containers on you?" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal coughed. "I really don't have that habit." He was used to staying in JoJo's galaxy. He would wander around when he had nothing to do. Anyway, someone would take care of everything for him. Wasn't he just going out to fight? Mo Lien threw him a humph and took out a small boat from the storage talisman. Although the boat wasn't big, it was more than enough to carry the two of them and the 4 people from the City of Sin. Without another word, Guangguang Darren stepped forward and hugged Ma Shurchen's thigh, determined to be a lag accessory. He must not be thrown into the sea by them. Lord Guangguang finally came out, so he naturally wanted to go out and play. Not only did he want to play, but he also wanted to eat all the delicacies in the world. According to Dun Dun, the human delicacies were very good. It wasn't easy for him to escape from the ceiling formation, jump out of the abyss, and leave this broken place surrounded by water. How could he not enjoy his future life? "It's all your fault." Hu Shurchen unhappily picked up the bald 3-year-old child and shook him a few times. If it weren't for the light congealing mirror's shielding seal, how could they not even be able to use the communication jade talisman? In 7 days, he can recover naturally. Master Guangguang didn't want to either. The little fellow muttered and raised his hand to hug Hu Jinshan's arm tightly. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't help but sigh. He wondered how the little stoic was doing. When he tossed her up, the little fellow looked like she was about to cry. She looked so pitiful that his heart ached for her. He really had to wait a few more days before he could contact her. How worrying. "Let's go." Mo Lien and Hu Jinshan boarded the boat at the same time and turned to look at the 4 people from the City of Sin. GC nodded in understanding and said to the other 3, "Take these 2 with us." Lying in the water, Lily the Zero couldn't help but shudder. However, she heard Ding Yun say with a smile, "Wait a moment. Prince Mo, you are the crown prince of the Divine Province, the most honorable person in the 3 provinces. But this is the River of Forgetfulness." Chapter 4982. This young master still has the final say in the River of Forgetfulness, Cult Master Ding said with a smile and gave a look to his subordinates. The short, skinny old man suddenly dashed forward and reached out with a sinister face to grab Shen Nangui's head. GC naturally wouldn't let him do it. She dragged Shen Nangui away and, together with old Zhou and the other 2, struck out a palm at the thin old man. The thin old man chuckled coldly without any change in his expression. A pair of old hands that looked like chicken claws suddenly came out of his sleeves and viciously clawed at old Zhou in front of him. Old Zhou retracted his hand very quickly, but his sleeve was caught by the thin old man's claws. With a ripping sound, he looked down and saw 2 faint bruises on his arm. It was obvious that this old man's hands were dipped in poison. Seeing that the thin old man had already grabbed Shen Nangui's collar, GC kicked him with a gloomy face. If this kick landed, the old man would definitely spit out 2 mouthfuls of blood. This thin old man was only skilled in the art of poison, but his actual cultivation might be below them. The old man let out a strange laugh, then took out his hand and sprinkled a cloud of poisonous powder, throwing it in front of GC and the other 3. GC and the other 3 hurriedly held their breaths and quickly took a step back. However, GC's eyes were sharp and her hands were fast. She jumped back with Shen Nangui and flew to Mo Lien's ship. At the same time, Lily, a zero, saw an opening and hurriedly jumped into the water. She flipped a few times like a dog. Mo Lien looked on coldly and didn't stop her. Lily, zero, crawled to the feet of Ding Yun and the others in a sorry state and repeatedly shouted, Save me, young master, save me. I don't know them, I don't know why they. Lily, zero's voice suddenly stopped and she felt her body become light. Someone had wrapped a spirit-binding rope around her neck and lifted her up in the air. She hurriedly stretched out her hands and grabbed the spirit-binding rope around her neck. Her face was pale and she coughed a few times. No wonder His Highness the Crown Prince is so angry. Cold Master Ding's eyes flickered as he carefully sized up the woman in front of him. A faint sneer appeared on his lips. She looks between her eyebrows, there is a 60% to 70% resemblance. However, her demeanor and behavior are too different. Cold Master Ding sized up Lily, zero, from head to toe and shook his head repeatedly. Where did you get the courage to imitate her? Lily, zero, instantly felt a chill run down her spine. She could hear her heart thumping non-stop. She suddenly understood, could it be that the reason why the two young masters were so angry at her was because they knew the owner of her face? Actually, she had no idea who her face belonged to at all. He only knew that the state preceptor had said that the closer one could get to this face, the more honorable and wealthy one would be able to obtain a life of honor and wealth. She did it. She worked hard and stood out from the rest of Lily, But why? What if her life instantly collapses the moment she leaves the Doro Kingdom's ancestral land? Wasn't this face beautiful? Wasn't it lovable? That was impossible. Lily, zero, hurriedly struggled and cried out in shock, young master, what are you saying? In the vast thousand realms, there were people who looked somewhat similar to each other, but there were some. How can you say that I'm imitating her? Oh. Ding Yun glanced at her with a smile. You're not imitating her. And no. Lily, zero, hurriedly shook her head and insisted that she didn't have any ill intentions of imitating others. Chapter 4983. Cold Master Ding could not help but sneer. He tightened the spirit-binding rope in his hand. Lily, zero, suddenly felt her breathing tighten. She choked and coughed a few times. Her face was as pale as paper. No, kill, cough. Lily, zero, felt an abnormal sense of panic. She felt like she had just climbed out of a wolf's den only to fall into a tiger's den. This was definitely not her illusion. Lily, zero, raised her head, trying hard to see the face of the man in front of her. However, she only saw a cold glint in the man's eyes, without the slightest bit of pity. Fear overflowed in Lily, zero's heart. She muttered to herself and shook her head. No, she could not be so unlucky, right? She had just come out of the Doro Kingdom's ancestral land. She had not even had a few days of comfortable and happy days. Was she going to die on the surface of the river of forgetfulness? Elder Deer Cry. This subordinate is here. The thin and short old man quickly retreated to Ding Yun's side and bowed respectfully with cupped fists. This cold master heard that you are best at the human face drum. Hearing this, the skinny old man's eyes lit up. He sized up Lily, zero, who was shivering all over, and cupped his hands with a smile. Sect Master, do you want me to make a beauty drum? It's a pity that this woman's face was soaked in potion before. The lines on her face are all destroyed. Even if you make a beauty drum, it won't look good. The perverted old man named Deer Cry licked the corner of his mouth and revealed a wretched smile. Oh. Cold Master Ding looked at Lily, zero, with disdain. Then what's the use of keeping her? Lily Zero was so frightened that her entire body twitched in fear. She pulled her hands and screamed, don't kill me, don't kill, I have use. My face, that fake face of yours really is ugly to death. Cold Master Ding scoffed as he directly flung the person towards Mo Lien with a wave of his hand. The woman was about to crash into the boat. Under such gravity, she might even smash a hole in the boat under her feet. GC took a step forward and punched Lily Zero in the chest. Lily Zero sucked in a breath of cold air. She could clearly hear the sound of her sternum breaking. That sudden force sent her flying. With a splash, she fell heavily into the water. Young Master Ding chuckled and said, "What an unromantic crown prince of Shenzhou. You don't even want a soft and warm body." TSK. Cold Master Ding sized them up a few times and said with a smile, "Wow, why do you look so pale?" Mo Lien glanced at him coldly. She was too lazy to talk nonsense with this person. He wanted to return to the abyss of the sacrificial sea to take a look, so how could he have the time to continue arguing with others? Unfortunately, this cult leader Ding's brain was probably not working well. Just a moment ago he was still smiling in the clear sky, but in the blink of an eye his face was clouded with clouds and thunderclaps. Let me guess, how many people are serving the Crown Prince of the Divine Land? Is it just these few people? TSK, Cold Master Ding muttered to himself. Suddenly, a cold glint flashed across his black eyes. If that's the case, then Your Highness, please stay for a chat. Mo Lien finally looked Ding Yun in the eye. The corners of her lips curled up slightly, and her phoenix eyes revealed a murderous intent. You're courting death. Chapter 4984. His cold words fell into Cult Master Ding's ears one by one. The anger in the latter's heart instantly erupted like a volcano, burning fiercely. Why was this person always acting like he was looking down on the common people, looking down on everyone from a high position? This was too disgusting. He knew that if he didn't kill this guy immediately in the lower star region, he would definitely cause trouble for him in the future. If that was the case, how hateful. Mo Lien narrowed his eyes at Ding Yun and became alert. Sure enough, Sect Master Ding raised his hand and waved it. Then, several tens of figures came out from behind him and rushed forward. He chin-teased with a faint smile, "He still wants to stay for dinner, Crown Prince." Mo Lien pursed his lips and didn't say anything. The cold expression on his face had already revealed his terrible mood. This Ding Yun always thought that if he killed him, he would have a chance. However, the truth was that even if he deliberately planned to kill him, the result wouldn't be satisfactory. Seeing dozens of figures pouncing on him, GC nervously clenched the weapon in her hand and looked like she was ready to fight to the death. She had no choice. Even if she regretted it so much that her intestines turned green, her lifeline was in the hands of that Crown Prince. If she dared to betray him and turn to the enemy, then she would definitely die without a burial place. Right now, the enemy had a lot of people, while she only had a few people here. She, Old Zhou, and the other two were already exhausted. She could only fight them head-on. GC had just thought of this when she saw the Crown Prince of the Divine Province standing at the bow of the ship suddenly raise his hands. A large number of squeaking things came out from his sleeves. Everyone took a closer look and couldn't help but show a bit of surprise. It turned out that the things that came out from Prince Mo's sleeves were hundreds of thousands of mechanical wooden birds. They crashed into the dozens of people rushing from the opposite side. Even Ding Yun was shocked and hurriedly shouted, "Get out of the way." But how could he make it in time? Ding Yun's dozens of subordinates were rushing toward Mo Lien's ship and just happened to meet the hundreds of thousands of mechanical wooden birds. When the two sides collided, the mechanical wooden bird spat out black lines of fire and suddenly fell on them. His speed was incomparably fast, leaving no time for anyone to react. As a result, the crowd saw black flames ignite on the bodies of the dozen or so people who had rushed over. The flames quickly spread throughout their bodies and wrapped them up in a ball. Black flames burned on their bodies silently and oppressively. The dozen or so people didn't even have time to shout before they turned into ashes and disappeared under the pitch-black flames. Lily, our number 0, shuddered and looked at Second State Preceptor Shenangue for help. How unlucky must she be to run into the Crown Prince of the Divine Land as soon as she left the clan grounds. With just a few words, he burned the person to ashes. After spitting out the black flames, the mechanical wooden bird continued to flap its wings and rose high into the air. Pairs of mechanical eyes suddenly turned around and stared coldly in Ding Yun's direction. The latter shuddered in his heart, and without another word, he ordered, "Fire." There were at least 300 archers on the dozen or so ships he had brought with him today. Once the order was given, the archers immediately got into position and shot hundreds of arrows at the mechanical birds in the sky. Dang, 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 dang. After a few clangs, the arrows that were released fell to the ground one after another as if they had hit an iron plate. They fell into the sea in disorder and made a series of splashes. Chapter 4985. Cold Master Ding cursed trash in his heart and suppressed the anger in his heart. He couldn't even kill a row of mechanical birds released by others, so how could he create Emolien? This Emolien was getting more and more abominable. Don't bother about those birds. Activate the defensive shield and rush over, Ding Yun said in a low voice with a cold face. No matter what, he had to make that guy stay here today. He had waited so long for this guy to be alone. If he missed this opportunity, there wouldn't be another one. If he didn't seize this perfect opportunity, when would he? While thinking, Ding Yun waved his hand and Elder Looming rushed over with a dozen devil cult disciples. A cold smile hung on his gloomy old face. He raised his hand and sprinkled a handful of fine powder over. Emolien didn't even frown. He looked coldly at Looming and the others who were rushing over to court death. He raised his hand to block He Chin, who was rubbing his fists and preparing to go forward. In a flash, Emolien formed a seal with his fingers. Several ink-colored lotuses floated around him and gathered to form death lotus seals. He threw them at Elder Looming and the others without any explanation. Looming's eyelids twitched and he hurriedly stepped back to avoid them. He didn't even need to touch the death lotus seal. He could feel the majestic power from a distance. It wasn't something a small poison master like him could withstand. Bang, 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 bang. The lotus seals landed in the crowd, causing them to vomit blood and fall to the ground. Instantly, they were crushed by a heavy force and their bones were broken. Their bodies cracked like broken bones. Crown Prince Mo's methods were ruthless. Even when he was indiscriminately killing people, his countenance was still serene, without the slightest ripple. It was so calm that it was as if he was looking at a group of weak ants. In fact, to him, these people were indeed insignificant. They dared to block his path and provoke him time and time again. They were already prepared to die. Ding Yun's eyes flickered and a trace of emotion flashed past his eyes. Compared to a month ago, Emolien's cultivation seemed to have inexplicably improved by leaps and bounds. What was going on? Could it be that he and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal had a fortuitous encounter in the undersea abyss? Hu Shichen blinked and revealed a curious expression. Your strength seems to have increased by quite a bit. Could this person be a monster? Other people would only advance by a small level or half a level. He, on the other hand, had advanced to a new level with a single leap. However, it must have something to do with the ancient Mo Lien's soul that Jojo had found. Mo Lien was really lucky. It was mainly because he had found a very good wife. His luck was super good, and this guy had also risen to the heavens with her. Every time he thought of this, it made his teeth ache. No wonder young Master Ding always thought of ways to kill him every time he saw him. Jealousy, pure jealousy. It was indeed very infuriating. Let's go. Mo Lien turned around and shouted at GC, old Zhou, and the others, who were stunned into a few blocks of wood. Only then did GC and the others come back to their senses, their eyes carrying traces of reverence. Their master was too powerful. They had never seen such a powerful person when they were in the undersea abyss. With one move of the lotus mark, the all-encompassing pitch-black lotus fire annihilated so many people in a matter of minutes. Super powerful. Just now, GC and the others were still muttering in their hearts, wondering if they had recognized him as their master too early and did not look at the situation. Chapter 4986. At this moment, they were incomparably glad that they had followed GC's prompt decision to cast aside their pride and acknowledge Mo Lien as their master. Judging from the Divine Province's Crown Prince's appearance, if they had hesitated just a little bit more, they might have lost their lives long ago. To them, what dignity and what honor and disgrace were truly too insignificant compared to their own lives. They had lived in the underwater abyss for so long and been imprisoned for so long. Day and night, they couldn't see the light and had no future. After finally escaping from that ghastly place with great difficulty and starting anew, there truly wasn't anything to be particular about. They just wanted to continue living. Now, it seemed that acknowledging this powerful master wasn't a loss at all. Cough, 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 cough. Several demonic cult disciples waved their hands to disperse the smell of smoke and fire, saying, Cult master, they cough, cough. Cult Master Ding gloomily stared in the direction of the ship's departure. He stared for a long while before looking up at the sky. The flock of mechanical birds in the air had already chased after the Crown Prince with a flurry of noises. The remains of several mechanical birds were scattered on the deck, and there was still a faint wisp of black fire lingering around them. Don't touch it. Cult Master Ding abruptly reprimanded when he saw a disciple reaching out to grab the remains, inwardly cursing, idiot. If he directly used his hand to grab the remains of the mechanical birds, the faint wisp of black fire could follow his fingers up his arm and climb all the way up until it swallowed him whole. Mo Lien, this fellow, was just this kind of malicious person. Even though he abandoned the remains of these mechanical birds and left, he still harbored malicious intentions. The enemy was becoming more and more difficult to deal with. How should they deal with it? Cult Master Ding's face was grim as he turned to look at Elder Deercry standing next to him and instructed him in a low voice. Achoo! Sir Jojo rubbed his nose and tugged at the furry cloak covering his body. Putting down the medical book in his hand and looking outside the pavilion, the little stoic muttered to herself, Who's scolding me? Third Mississippi, the palace servant's soft calls entered Arbor's ears, and the little stoic looked up. Outside the pavilion, a slender woman walked in from afar. When she was still a few dozen meters away, she bowed to her. The young Crown Prince Consort opened her mouth and yawned absent-mindedly. Who is it? These past few days, Yuan Zhen had been serving this little stoic crown princess by her side, so she was somewhat familiar with her temperament. Every time she spoke in such a casual manner, there would be a hint of impatience hidden in her voice. This was the displeasure of being disturbed. The lady outside the pavilion is the third daughter of the talisman aristocratic family, the Qi family, Miss Qi Liren. Does the crown princess want to meet him? She's here to compete with me in charms. Arbor asked. Yuanzhen coughed and shook his head. That's not it. Third Miss should be here to greet you. The Qi family is indeed the largest talisman aristocratic family in Artsangzhou, and this third Miss is also a black-level great talisman practitioner, but, in fact, many of the young ladies in large patrician families didn't care that much about cultivation and strength. Who would be in a hurry to compete with others? Ultimately, they had to get married. As long as a woman could maintain her beautiful appearance and prolong her life to accompany her husband in the future, that was enough. Not everyone was as exotic as you, the crown princess, who had to keep pace with men in everything. Cough. The little crown princess was expressionless. Since she's not here to compete, then there's no point in meeting her. I won't see her. Yuanzhen. Chapter 4987. Ant was simply a bit speechless. Normally, when His Majesty interacted with the little lady, they were always chatting and laughing, as if they got along very well. Who knew that when it was her turn to be alone with the little lady, she would feel like breaking down before she could even say 3 sentences? She really didn't know how His Majesty could tolerate this oddball little stoic's brain. Arbor glanced at Yuanzhen beside him. Do you have anything else to say? This servant was actually speechless. Then should we drive her away? Yuanzhen probed the little crown princess. The little stoic hastily nodded and picked up that medical book again. Drive her away. She can come if she wants to compete, drive her away if she doesn't want to compete. She didn't have the free time to chat with these orioles and swallows everywhere she went. If she had the time, she might as well take an afternoon nap to make up for it. Yuanzhen somewhat sympathized with the third young lady. This third miss of the Qi estate had probably never seen such an oddball little crown princess and quickly walked out of the gazebo and stopped in front of the third young lady, who was standing with downcast eyes. Qi Liren curtsied, and the maidservant Xiaoju behind her hastily stepped forward and also curtsied before retreating behind her miss. Yuanzhen returned a half curtsy and coughed lightly, saying, "It's like this. If third miss doesn't have anything else to say, please return first. The crown princess is busy right now." Qi Liren couldn't help but be startled, and she slightly raised her eyes to look at the figure inside the gazebo. Busy? The little crown princess was currently sitting there leisurely flipping through a book. Yuanzhen said with a serious expression, the crown princess is busy. She said that if third miss is free, you can take a stroll in the nearby garden. How could the crown princess say something so courteous? Aunt Yuanzhen lowered her eyes to hide her tired expression. This was all for the sake of the Qi family. The best strategy was to say a few soft words to the third young lady and send her away as soon as possible. Qi Liren was startled, and she politely curtsied to Yuanzhen. Thank you for your trouble, Aunt. Since the crown princess isn't free, then Liren will take her leave first. Third miss, please. Yuanzhen praised her in her heart. As expected of a well-educated young lady from a great aristocratic family. She didn't continue to pester her endlessly and went forward to cause trouble. Otherwise, it wouldn't look good for both sides. How should she put it? With such a willful little crown princess, her aunt was at her wit's end. Seeing that he had tactfully left, the little stoic nodded in a good mood. She picked up a plate of fruits and forked a piece into her mouth. As long as no one was blind enough to provoke Jojo-sama was usually an easygoing person. Yuanzhen bowed slightly. Crown princess, would you like me to bring you a bed so that you can bask in the sun and take a nap? The young crown prince consort nodded expressionlessly. That's fine too. Yuanzhen was speechless. She obviously agreed with this idea, but she had to put on a "it's just a so-so" expression. She really lost to this little crown princess. As Chi Liren walked past the long corridor across from them, she glanced at the gazebo from the corner of her eye. She saw the palace maids hurriedly bringing over a carved bed from who knew where. "Miss, this crown princess is putting on too much airs." The maidservant Xiaoju couldn't resist pursing her lips. "She really thinks that our Phoenix Emperor City's imperial palace is her family's back garden." Chi Liren knitted her brows and said aloofly, "Xiaoju, don't speak carelessly. She mainly came today to see this crown princess of the divine province and didn't plan to strain her relationship with her." Since the crown princess wasn't willing to see her, she also didn't need to approach her. Chapter 4988. In any case, there would always be a chance for them to meet in the future. There was no hurry. Chi Liren made up her mind and warned Xiaoju, "You always like to blabber. If you go to His Majesty, you're not allowed to speak carelessly." Xiaoju stuck out her tongue and hurriedly nodded, indicating that she definitely wouldn't speak carelessly. The master and servant duo hadn't walked far along the palace wall when they saw Wu Ruame, dressed in a red robe with short sleeves. She was riding a large dog that was half the height of a person and was currently running towards them. Xiaoju cried out in alarm and hurriedly stood in front of her miss. Her small face was ashen and then white as she shrieked, "You, what are you doing?" Wu Ruame hurriedly tightened the noose around the dog's neck and uttered a shoo. The large dog stuck out its tongue and panted heavily before stopping in front of the master and servant duo. Chi Liren took several steps back, her pretty face changing slightly. Wu Ruame was too outrageous. How could she ride a large dog and run amok in the imperial palace's inner court? Relying on His Majesty's trust in her father, she was so impudent. She simply didn't have the slightest bit of etiquette and demeanor of a noble family's young miss. Outrageous. Seeing that it was Chi Liren, Wu Ruame hurriedly smiled and said, "I didn't scare Miss Chi, did I? Miss Wu, this dog of yours." "Oh. This large dog. I bought it the day before yesterday when I was visiting a newly opened spirit beast garden. Doesn't it look very majestic and domineering?" Wu Ruame smiled and patted the dog's head. "I really like it too much." Hearing this, Chi Liren couldn't help but inwardly roll her eyes. "Like hell I'd believe you." She didn't even know if half of this Miss Wu's 3 sentences were true. Not to mention that there had never been a spirit beast garden at the foot of the imperial palace. Even if there was one, a person could only form a contract with one beast in their lifetime. Wu Ruame already had a spirit beast by her side, so it definitely wasn't this large dog. It was also impossible to say that she only treated this large dog as a mount. This large dog was clearly a low-level spirit dog. Logically speaking, a beast that had already developed intelligence definitely wouldn't sully itself as a mount. Miss Wu swiftly jumped to the ground and cupped her hands towards the green-faced Miss Chi. She said with a forthright smile, "Miss Chi, you aren't angry, right? I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't hit you, did I? Don't touch our young miss." Xiaoju was like a mother hen protecting her chicks. She hurriedly stood in front of third young lady with her chest puffed out, as if Miss Wu's outstretched left hand was infected with some sort of virus. She had a look of disdain on her face. Wu Ruame was rebuffed. Embarrassed, she retracted her hand and coughed, "Then, if there's nothing else, I'll go first." Since others already despised her so much, there was no need for her to suck up to them and befriend them, right? She, Wu Ruame, had her own backbone, humph. Chi Liren rolled her eyes and suddenly said, "Miss Wu, you were riding a dog and running around in the inner court. It's not a big deal if you bumped into me. But if you offend that noble crown princess, I'm afraid His Majesty will be the first to punish you." Wu Ruame was stunned. She quickly turned around to look at Qi Liren. "Ah. Oh, right. I heard from my father that the crown princess of Shenzhou is here, right? Then I really have to meet her properly." Qi Liren frowned. Wu Ruomei's reaction was somewhat different from what she had expected. It seemed that this woman was rather shrewd. Chapter 4989. Miss. A skinny servant girl carrying a quiver of arrows on her back chased after her, almost bumping into Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju exclaimed and hurriedly pushed her away. "How dare you? What's wrong with you, little girl? How dare you bump into my miss so recklessly?" Although this servant girl's body was skinny, her strength wasn't small. She didn't budge at all after being pushed by Xiao Ju. Dilly, Wu Ruomei hurriedly pulled the servant girl to her side. "Didn't I tell you to slow down? I'm very familiar with this place, Miss Wu." Qi Liren frowned and said in a low voice, "This is the inner court of the Imperial Palace. It's not like our ordinary household. It's really inappropriate for you to allow your servant girl to run around and yell at the palace walls. It's better to teach her more on a daily basis." Wu Ruomei turned her head to look, only to see Qi Liren leave with Xiao Ju and her servant girl after leaving these lecturing words. "So serious." The maidservant beside young Miss Wu curled her lips and said. Her voice was neither loud nor soft, just enough to fall into the ears of the master and servant who were leaving. "Miss, Prime Minister Wu's daughter is too rude. Even the servant girl beside her is unbearably vulgar. She has a good life." Prime Minister Wu had always regarded this daughter as the apple of his eye. Now that the Prime Minister was highly valued by His Majesty and had a meteoric rise, the entire Prime Minister's estate would rise with him. "Miss Wu's impetuous temperament, do you think she'll have a conflict with that person?" Qi Liren pursed her lips, a faint smile appearing on her lips. "It's hard to say." However, thinking of Wu Ruomei's strange reaction just now, Qi Liren couldn't help but frown again. "Let's wait and see on the other side." Wu Ruomei rode the big dog to the vicinity of the garden. She hurriedly put away the big dog and quickly ran towards the pavilion. Before she could get close, she was stopped by a few palace servants. "Shoo, lower your voice." Wu Ruomei couldn't help but lower her voice, her eyes darting towards the pavilion. "The crown princess is resting there." The palace servants nodded in unison. Although they hadn't taken care of the crown princess for long, the little crown princess's temperament seemed to be very easy to control. She liked peace and quiet. Don't provoke her for no reason. Even if you did, don't provoke her too much. Otherwise, once she retaliated, there was a 99% chance that you would die. For example, yesterday, there was a courting palace maid who poisoned the little crown princess. The first 2 times, the little crown princess ignored her, but the 3rd time, she smacked her to death. Even her family was executed by His Majesty in a fit of anger. She was really unlucky. Now, His Majesty wanted to investigate further to find out who was the one who could not tolerate the little crown princess. "I reckon that another batch of people will die if they find out." Wu Ruomei giggled and said, "Hey, I'll sneak over. I won't disturb her, and I won't make things difficult for you, okay?" "No, Miss Wu." A palace maid hurriedly waved her hand and said, "If the little crown princess is woken up by someone, she will be angry for the whole afternoon." The corner of Wu Ruomei's mouth twitched. "Then I'll wait for her here. Hey, bring me a chair. I'll sit here for a while and wait for her to wake up." The palace servants looked at her speechlessly. In the end, they couldn't dissuade the Prime Minister's daughter. They brought her an old-fashioned wooden armchair and placed it opposite the pavilion. Miss Wu sat down on the old-fashioned wooden armchair with a golden knife. Unfortunately, this was a shady place, and there was always a chilly wind blowing behind her neck. It was really not as good as the little Crown Princess Pavilion. It was sunny and warm, and there were curtains hanging around to block the wind. Chapter 4990. Wu-Ruame sat there for more than 2 hours and sneezed several times in a row. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the royal servants who rushed up to cover her nose. The young crown princess didn't wake up until the end of the afternoon. At that time, the sun was gradually setting in the west, but the sunlight inside the pavilion had also dimmed considerably. Wu-Ruame quickly jumped up and moved her frozen hands and feet. She was truly miserable. After sitting here, those junior royal servants had been squatting around her. Whenever she made the slightest noise, someone would immediately come up to cover her mouth, cough. Yuanzhen coughed and bowed to whisper, "Crown Princess, are you awake?" The young Crown Prince Consort was a little confused. She flipped over and sat down on the couch, a hint of bewilderment on her face. Yuanzhen's mouth twitched. According to her understanding of the young Crown Princess, it would take about 7 to 8 minutes for the Crown Princess to return to her senses. Arbor yawned and looked up at Yuanzhen. "Why hasn't Duanyu returned yet?" "His Majesty is receiving the envoys from the barbarian tribes today, so he might come back a bit later." The young Crown Princess weakly replied with an "oh" and rubbed her stomach. Unexpectedly, when he raised his eyes, he saw a young girl dressed in a red robe with short sleeves tied up. She had an excited look on her face as she ran and hopped in front of him. You're that Crown Princess of the Divine Province, right?" Wu-Ruame reflexively wiped her hands on her gown and excitedly shook Arbor's hands. "I was fortunate enough to see you up close. Sure enough, you're identical to the person in the painting. Fakes don't have half of your charm." Arbor blinked and looked down at her little paws that were being held. She asked expressionlessly, "Who are you?" Yuanzhen couldn't help but facepalm and hastily stepped forward to introduce, "Crown Princess, this is Prime Minister Wu's daughter, Miss Wu-Ruame." Oh. Arbor had heard of Prime Minister Wu's name before. As Duanyu's right and left arm, a trusted aide, he should naturally be a good person. The young Crown Princess raised her eyebrows and understood the meaning behind Wu-Ruame's words. "You've seen imitations before." "That's right. Not long ago, there was a fake mixed in with the messengers from the kingdom of Daluo. You didn't see that woman. She's really ugly. Her fake face made me want to vomit." The young Crown Princess moved to the side, and Wu-Ruame very naturally sat down next to her. The two of them started chatting like this. Yuanzhen was speechless. Although they were chatting, it seemed like Miss Wu was the only one chattering non-stop. From the many countries where the fake Luo came to visit His Majesty, to how His Majesty searched the entire city for the 3 state teachers, to how His Majesty received the news and chased after Wang Chuan. The young Crown Prince Consort sat there and listened the entire time as she spoke vividly and vividly. When Duanyu came over in the evening, he saw the two of them chatting while sitting side by side on a couch. How strange. Jojo didn't get along with just anyone. Duanyu raised his eyebrows and allowed the palace servants to roll up the pavilion's curtain for him. He slowly walked in with a smile in his eyes. Arbor asked when he saw him enter, "Duanyu, are you done?" "I chatted with little Maisie the entire afternoon and almost finished the pastries." Aunt Yuanjin couldn't help rolling her eyes. The Crown Princess's N.O., is that so, didn't exceed 20 words, and she even said that she chatted with someone the entire afternoon. What a joke. Duanyu's gloomy mood instantly brightened, and he quickly walked up. Chapter 4991. Don't eat so many pastries. It'll be dinner soon, Duan Yu said with a chuckle. Every time Jojo was gluttonous, she would reveal an expression of, "This thing is just a so-so," or "I only eat a bit occasionally." Her earnest little face looked comical. She was clearly a foodie, yet she was unwilling to admit it. Arbor looked down at the pastry she was holding and then glanced at the disapproving Duan Yu. She silently tossed the pastry onto the plate and retracted her paw to pat off the pastry crumbs on her fingers. "I didn't eat much." Crown Prince Consort, you ate several pieces of pastries while listening to Miss Wu's story. Aunt Yuanjun hurriedly said, "This servant has already reminded you 3 times. If you eat too much, you won't be able to eat dinner and will easily suffer from indigestion." The little crown princess glared at this person who was undermining her and then angrily checked her pulse. "I'm very well." Duan Yu curled his lips and couldn't help laughing when he saw her small movements. His gaze swept over Wu Ruome, and she hastily bowed and said, "Your Majesty, Ruome should return home for dinner, so I'll take my leave first." Duan Yu nodded indifferently. Wu Ruome had just turned around and walked 2 steps when she suddenly turned around and ran up to Qiao Mu in high spirits again. "Crown Prince Consort, tomorrow's weather is pretty good. How about we go for a walk together? I want to hear the Crown Princess talk about my idol, Commandery Princess Wushuang. I heard that Commandery Princess Wushuang established a Tiger Wolf battalion that is especially invincible and incomparably powerful." Duan Yu expressionlessly looked at this Miss Wu. This fellow opened her mouth and seemed to want to continue chatting with Jojo on the side. Sir Jojo nodded repeatedly like a chick pecking at rice. When she heard Wu Ruame talk about Commandery Princess Wushuang, she also hummed several times in agreement. Duan Yu was speechless and quietly asked Aunt Yuanjun, who was standing on the side, "The Crown Princess has been chatting with Miss Wu like this entire afternoon?" Yuanjun nodded decisively. He stretched out his palms and flipped them back and forth. "It definitely won't exceed 20 words. Miss Wu has made 3 pots of tea. This servant thinks that she won't be able to eat dinner." Duan Yu's mouth twitched. "Escort Miss Wu out." Wasn't he a chatterbox? When he thought of this, Duan Yu couldn't help but grit his teeth. He had miscalculated to the extreme. In fact, it was easy for a chatterbox to get close to Jojo. For example, Mo Lien was shameless and clingy. Her sweet words and honeyed words seeped into Jojo's life bit by bit. Before Jojo even realized it, she had already been tricked by Mo Lien. Bah, shameless bastard. Look at Wu Ruome. As soon as she started talking to Jojo, it was as if she had opened up a chatterbox. There was no stopping her. If things went on like this, how were they going to eat dinner? How baffling. Yuanjun suppressed the smile on her lips and quickly walked up. She curtsied at Miss Wu and said gently, "This servant will escort Miss Wu out." Wu Ruame quickly waved her small hands and stammered, No need. There is no need to trouble Auntie to escort me out. Ruame will take her leave now." Strange, why did His Majesty's expression look so volatile? Could it be that she spoke too much with the Crown Princess and provoked His Majesty's displeasure? Wu Ruame quickly left. She turned back every 2 steps and waved at Arbor while calling out, "Crown Princess, Ruame will come find you tomorrow." The little Crown Princess expressionlessly waved her paw. Chapter 4992. Splash. After the sound of water splashing, a few corpse fish that were half hanging on the boat were kicked into the water. "The water source near the River of Forgetfulness is severely polluted," Shenwook said with a serious expression. "Looks like we don't have to wait another 3 years for this place to be eliminated due to the harsh environment." After getting rid of the corpse fish at the entrance of the abyss of the sacrificial sea, Shi Qin said solemnly, "Jojo's aura is faintly discernible. It looks like he came here before but left a day or two ago. Could he have returned to Dragonflame City first? Mo Lien pondered for a moment and nodded indifferently. It's very possible. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go back immediately, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal said hurriedly. Mo Lien had long been impatient to return home and wanted to rush back immediately. He didn't know how Chow Chow was doing right now. He must be scolding him every day, there's no time to lose. Let's go back immediately, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal urged. His gaze fell on the man and woman tied to the bow of the boat. How did they handle it? Since we've asked clearly, there's no need to keep them. Mo Lien responded apathetically, and after sweeping a glance at Shen Nangui and the others, he shifted his gaze back to where he came from. Shen Nangui was startled. He stammered and hurriedly made a sound. GC impolitely glared at him and lifted her hand to remove the ball of cloth from his mouth. Your Highness, we've already told you everything we know. We'll tell you everything we know. Please let the two of us live. When Crown Prince Mo heard this, he turned around and swept them a cold glance. Such a bone-chilling gaze caused Shen Nangui and Lily, to shut their mouths, no longer daring to speak carelessly. The Crown Prince in front of them had a cold and threatening gaze. It was as if his entire body was emitting a frosty aura. He was so magnificent and dazzling that no one dared to look at him directly. Your Highness, I also know that the Kingdom of Doluo is planning to secretly attack Dragonflame City, Lily, Zero said, her body trembling uncontrollably. Lily, Shen Nangui turned pale with fright and tried to get up to cover Lily, Zero's mouth. However, GC's movements were too fast. She pushed his hand back and said, behave yourself. Don't get touchy as you please. Mo Lien gloomily stared at that woman in ragged clothes, who cut a sorry figure from head to toe, and who was covered in bloodstains. This woman had fallen into the sea several times before, and her head had even knocked against the deck of the boat several times. Although the wound on her head had already scabbed over, the dirty, unidentifiable bloody scar was extremely unpleasant to look at. Lily Zero had a tactful expression on her face as she cried out, I overheard it. When the Grand Imperial Preceptor was discussing with the monarch, I just happened to hear a few words. They're secretly plotting to attack Dragonflame City. I'm not lying. Bastard. Mo Lien's cold gaze swept past the emaciated Shen Nangui. She suddenly raised her hand and sucked him under her feet. Shen Nangui only felt an irresistible force pull him over. His body was involuntarily pulled over by the suction force. Why you guys? Shen Nangui could not help but exclaim. When he felt his head being grabbed, his face turned pale. Mo Lien did not want to search his soul at first. There was something strange in this person's consciousness. Chapter 4993. However, she couldn't be bothered with that right now and directly pulled him up into the air. Halfway through the soul-searching, Mo Lien sensed that this guy's soul was about to explode, so she directly sent him flying with a kick, tossing him far into the sea. After the tremor subsided, huge waves crashed towards their small boat. Fortunately, Bu Shirchen was prepared and blocked all the splashes outside the defensive barrier. When Mo Lien returned with a grim expression, Bu Shirchen asked, "How was it?" "We only searched half of it. That restriction is very strong, so we were lucky to be able to search half of it." "Then what should we do now?" "Go find Duan Yu first." Bu Shirchen thought he misheard and stared at Mo Lien dumbfoundedly. "Find Duan Yu? Are you sure?" Mo Lien nodded expressionlessly. Hu Shichen glanced at Mo Lien strangely and silently criticized in his mind. What kind of feelings does Mo Lien have for Duan Yu? The enemy was already about to reach his hometown in Dragon Flame City, yet he still leisurely said to go find Duan Yu first. That's right, with Duan Yu's friendship with him, he would probably send reinforcements. This place is closer to Tsang province, and we can't summon flying beasts or use transportation talisman matrices right now. Let's go ashore first. They had to find Duan Yu first. It would be faster if he used a flying spirit beast to send them back. Moreover, his Dragon Flame City's defenses weren't that easy to break through. With 30,000 elites gathered in the city, unless the kingdom of Duoluo sent 1 million soldiers to attack, Dragon Flame City should be able to handle it. How could a mere small grassland kingdom gather 1 million soldiers? In any case, Mo Lien didn't believe it. Hu Shichen nodded and coughed lightly. That's true. Finding Duan Yu for help seems more reliable. Alright then, let's quickly depart for Phoenix Emperor City. How many days do you think it will take? Within 2 days, Mo Lien replied calmly. It was precisely because it was fast that they should hurry to Tsang province to find Duan Yu. Otherwise, with the speed of the ship, it would take more than 10 days to swim back to the Divine Land slowly. Hechen patted Mo Lien's shoulder and said with a "Mhm, Brother Duan Yu will definitely help us." Mo Lien nodded. When she turned around, her eyes coldly swept over GC. For some reason, GC felt a flash of inspiration, and she instantly understood the meaning behind her master's gaze. She hurriedly raised her hand, and a cold dagger appeared between her fingers. Before Lily or Zero could figure out what was going on, she felt an incomparably cold sensation in her throat. When he lowered his head to look, the dagger had already slit his throat, drawing out an incomparably magnificent line of blood. Lily or Zero's eyes widened as she made a sound from her throat. Her expression was one of disbelief as she struggled to speak. Why? Why did he kill her? She had already explained everything about the kingdom of Duoluo, so why did he still want to kill her? Unwilling to accept this, Lily or Zero collapsed heavily on the ground with a sorrowful expression. Her neck was slightly arched, as though she wanted to see what color the haze in the sky could reveal. After all, she had just undergone plastic surgery, and her beautiful life had probably just begun. It was needless to say how miserable it was for her to die in this sea of forgetfulness. Lily or Zero's corpse was thrown into the sea to feed the zombie fish, so no one would care about her life or death. On the other side, Duan Yu, who was currently serving food to Sir Jojo, paused in his actions. His nose itched as though he was yearning for something. "Your Majesty. The East Mountain King requests an audience." Chapter 4994. Jojo, you eat first. I'll be right back. Arbor replied with an "oh," and was currently using his chopsticks to poke at a piece of tomato fish, battling with it. Yuanjin expressionlessly stood on the side, occasionally refilling the little crown princess soup and reminding her to drink more nourishing soup. Arbor secretly peeked at Yuanjin. "Aunt, you should also go eat." In reality, she really wasn't that particular about her meals. She simply didn't need someone to stand on the side and serve her with this and that. Yuanjin curtsied. Yes. Thus, she led several junior palace maids out of the door. Seeing that there was no one else in the hall, the little crown princess immediately tossed her chopsticks aside and walked to the other end of the long table. She picked up a large soup spoon and ate 2 mouthfuls of corn shrimp. When Duan Yu entered, he saw the little stoic pacing back and forth around the table while holding a small silver bowl in her hand. She moved the spoon from side to side as if she was pointing at the mountains while muttering, "Eat this? I don't like it. Eat that." This corn shrimp tastes pretty good. Why are you so picky? Mother knows. You're too annoying. You can only make your own decisions after you come out. Listen to mother for now. Duan couldn't resist twitching his mouth, and he quickly walked up to pull her back. Who are you talking to? This little fellow was rambling on and on, looking a bit comical. Arbor rubbed his stomach and said in all seriousness, Baby likes to eat food with divine energy, but food with spiritual energy is a bit disdainful. As for ordinary ingredients, he seemed even more disdainful. Duan pursed his lips and said, he's as picky as his father. Right. Arbor's eyes brightened, and he immediately said to Duan, he's like his father. He's picky and especially annoying. Duan couldn't help nodding in amusement. Yes, especially annoying. Jojo, this is for you. He casually stuffed a small piece of exquisite spice into her hands. Light it to sleep at night. You'll sleep better and won't wake up in the middle of the night. Arbor was taken aback and muttered to himself, For the past 2 days, whenever she closed her eyes, she would feel as if she was floating and struggling on the sea. Her sleep was very restless. Don't think too much about it. If our people have any news about them, they will naturally report back. Duan paused and looked at her with a grin. You're overthinking things. Don't tell me you think they're already dead. Bah. Arbor rolled his eyes. Duan couldn't help being amused. There's nothing wrong with their life lantern miniatures, so you don't need to worry. Perhaps they don't have a boat or a paddle right now. They can only hold on to a broken wooden board and float on the sea. They float for a while, 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 float for a while. Sir Jojo glanced at him, and his tense little face suddenly relaxed. He laughed and said, Liar. What happened just now? It's nothing, just some trivial matters. Duan pulled her to sit down. Eat some more. Achoo. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked up at the clear sky. Didn't you say we could reach in a day or two? GC and the others were rowing the boat with all their might. When they heard his voice, they turned back to look. My lord, we're going against the wind, so we're rowing slower. We can reach the shore at the earliest tomorrow morning. Hurry up, these conditions are simply too terrible. There's not even a shelter. Thankfully, it's not raining, or else we wouldn't even have a shelter. Don't, just shut up. Mo Lien glared at him. Whatever he said came out of his mouth. Chapter 4995. That night, as they wished, they welcomed a violent storm. Prince Mo was in awe of the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's mouth. Whatever he said came true without any hesitation. The few of them faced the wind and rain, working together in the same boat. In the pouring rain, they drifted along with the waves, bobbing up and down, swaying endlessly. GC and the other 3 took off their outer robes and sat on the boat. They held a jar in one hand and quickly filled it with water with the other. They hurriedly poured the water out of the boat. Mo Lien and Jichin each held an umbrella and sat expressionlessly at the side. They looked at each other wordlessly. Crown Prince Mo's heart was on the verge of collapse, and he was also very speechless. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was indeed a born jinx. He was used to tricking his teammates and himself. Look at this torrential downpour. Our small boat probably won't be able to hold on for much longer. MMPH. Before Jichin could finish speaking, Mo Lien abruptly stretched out a hand to cover her mouth. You rascal, do you want this boat to be completely scrapped? As soon as he finished speaking, a thunderous boom was heard from the horizon. A bolt of lightning as thick as a bull's mouth suddenly struck down, coincidentally landing on their boat. As a result, how could the entire ship withstand such a blow? In just a matter of minutes, the ship fell apart and scattered into the sea in pieces. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal squatted on a wooden plank and looked at Prince Mo with a dumbfounded expression. Ji Chen. Mo Lien was so angry that she shouted his full name. Will you die if you don't talk nonsense? Me? What though the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at the sky, speechless. How could his words be so divine? How could he communicate with the heavens and summon the wind and rain with just one sentence? She wasn't his Qiao. Ha! Mo Lien glanced at him. From now on, don't talk. Ji Chen glared at Mo Lien angrily. The two of them were now standing on a broken wooden plank, drifting forward in the wind and rain. Although they had activated their defensive barriers to keep the water vapor outside, the current situation was simply too comical. Moreover, when had the two of them ever been so miserable? The boat had been torn apart, and they had to use a plank as a stepping stone. Mo Lien glared at Ma Shichen again. Don't talk. I didn't say anything, Yuan Shichen said innocently. Mo Lien, what should we do now? GC and the others beside him were also lying on half of the wooden planks with dumbfounded expressions on their faces. They were still holding the jugs that they used to scoop water from before, and it seemed that they still hadn't recovered from the shock of the lightning flash just now. Mo Lien said expressionlessly. Fortunately, this place is not far from the shore. I plan to use the flying talisman to fly ashore. What do you say? Of course I'm with you. He-chin quickly said, so, you're going to abandon the ship and leave. What a joke, the ship had already been struck by lightning and thunder. If it didn't fly, would it really drift on the sea? Mo Lien really wanted to rush over and give him a good kick. Didn't he know why he would abandon the ship? Whatever that jinx said came true. At this moment, Mo Lien felt angry just looking at him. I didn't do it on purpose. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal said sullenly, I was just saying. Who would have thought that the weather on the sea would change so suddenly? It suddenly started raining. Mo Lien was expressionless. She took out a few flying talismans from her sleeve and threw them to the others. Keep up. He couldn't be bothered to talk to Yuan Shichen anymore. If he ignored him and left him hanging, he would definitely complain to his wife when he saw his wife later. Notice, it's almost 11 o'clock when I'm back from working overtime today. I'll catch up on sleep first and catch up on the third watch tomorrow morning. I reckon that this month at the end of the year will be very busy. Chapter 4996. Shi Qin hastily said to GC and the others with a grin, all right, don't lie motionlessly on the wooden plank. Everyone has a flight talisman. Keep up. GC and GC were overjoyed and hastily caught the flight talismans Mo Lien tossed over. They swiftly slapped them on their bodies and soared into the sky. They originally thought that they would have to expend their divine energy to fly, but now that they used flight talismans, they realized that it was a great fortune amidst misfortune. As they floated in the sky above the river of forgetfulness amidst the wind and rain, everyone's hearts ached a bit. Wasn't this too bitter? On the other side, Arbor slept until the middle of the night when she was suddenly jolted awake by a nightmare. She hastily sat up and curled up her legs while hugging her quilt. Her delicate brows involuntarily knitted together. Inexplicably, she actually dreamed that her husband was asking for help at sea just now. She must have dreamed of what she thought about during the day. How could her husband be hugging her thigh and sobbing pitifully? Misconception. Definitely. The little stoic cracked her small lips. This fellow laid down again and tossed and turned on the bed for a while. She heard the rustling of the rain outside the window accompanied by the whistling of the wind, so noisy that she couldn't calm down. The little stoic abruptly sat up. She couldn't sleep again. They couldn't have really met with great misfortune at sea as Duan predicted, right? The little stoic muttered to herself before jumping off the bed and putting on her brocade shoes before heading outside. The rain outside was rather heavy, and the faint sound of a flute was faintly transmitted into the wind, sounding like weeping and complaining, drawn out and continuous. Arbor soundlessly left the room and took out an ink-painted umbrella from her inner world, following the sound of the flute forward. Pausing in the pitter-patter of rain, Arbor gazed at the figure in plain clothes inside the pavilion. She felt that his back was bleak, as if it contained endless sorrow. Arbor hesitated slightly, but she still couldn't resist walking into the pavilion with heavy footsteps. That person suddenly turned around, a pair of watery peach blossom eyes staring fixedly at her. His clothes were very thin, and as he stood in the wind, his surroundings were silent and still, as if he was the only person left in the world. His figure was slender and tall with long black hair, and he tightly gripped a green bamboo flute in his hand. When he looked at Arbor, his pitch-black pupils involuntarily made her heart tighten. "Did I wake you up?" He smiled apologetically at her. After 3 seconds of silence, the two people said, "I couldn't sleep." Hence, they looked at each other with a smile. Mother's 100th day. The day she left, it was just like today. It was raining cats and dogs, and it didn't stop. A whole hole pierced through the sky. It's your own heart that's been stabbed, right? Xiaomu thought to herself. Duan gently raised his hand and swept his sleeve across the round table in the pavilion. His fingers slowly caressed the icy surface of the table. She was only a normal person. There will come a day when she will leave before me. Life is like this. From the day you are born, you will experience loss, 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 until there is nothing left for you to lose. However, your obsession is too heavy. You will always wonder if I could have redeemed everything if I had arrived a bit earlier that day. However, we don't have ifs. The little stoic stood behind him and listened silently. Her small hands involuntarily clenched. Who didn't have an obsession? Everyone had one. It depended on how you faced it. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, no one is willing to be alone. Chapter 4997. Duan, she didn't know how to comfort him. She only felt that all words of comfort were empty and weak. How could she empathize without experiencing it personally? Just like when the holy water sect left her back then, she was in so much pain that she couldn't breathe and couldn't easily say, "I can let it go." In reality, it was simply hard to let it go. They were only ordinary people in the world, not those aloof and resolute people who could see the world clearly. There were 8 great sufferings in life. Love, separation, and hatred were difficult to obtain. No one could help her. She could only walk out on her own and release her emotions. Duan. The little stoic called out to him. Like a kitten's paw, she lightly scratched the lake in his heart and parted the layers of ripples. Duan suddenly turned around and strode forward. He abruptly pulled her into his arms and tightly hugged her. This hug had nothing to do with romance, only a sense of disappointment and loss. The little stoic was startled and subconsciously wanted to pry his arms away and break free from his embrace. However, she heard him lower his head next to her ear and murmur vaguely, "Don't move, just a hug is enough." He would only hug her once in this lifetime, and it would also be his impudence tonight. In reality, he already knew that if he missed it for a moment, he would miss it for a lifetime. Even if time turned back, even if water was spilled, a missed opportunity was a missed opportunity. He couldn't force it in this lifetime. When the little stoic returned to the room, it was already late at night. The light inside the room was dim, and a figure was indistinct outside the door. The shadows of the trees outside the window swayed, and the rustling of the rain accompanied by the sound of the wind made one's heart endlessly vexed. Xiao Mu sat on the edge of the bed for a long time before abruptly slapping her own leg. Who asked you to go out of curiosity? Who asked you to be unable to control your legs? She abruptly threw herself onto the bed, allowing herself to sink into the soft brocade quilt. What to do? After going out for a walk, she became even more unable to sleep. The little stoic tossed and turned on the bed, inwardly vexed. She felt that she wouldn't be able to face him tomorrow at all after that hug. Even the stoic face understood how deep and heavy this man's feelings for her were. The little fellow rolled around in the soft brocade quilt for most of the night. Finally, she couldn't hold it in any longer. She flipped open the blanket and jumped off the bed. After taking out pen and paper from her inner world, the little stoic sat down at the table. She hesitated for a very, very long time before writing a few words and rolling them out. She wrote a few more words and rolling them out again. Just like that, an hour passed. Looking at the sky, it was almost bright. In the end, he couldn't dawdle any longer. The little crown princess took a deep breath and wrote a line of words on the paper. Then, she covered the paper and walked out quickly. Outside the window, the morning breeze blew in. Under the paperweight was a thin piece of paper with 4 words written on it: "Go home, don't miss me." When he went out, the rain had already stopped. The puddles on the ground had yet to dry up. He raised his head to look at the sky. It was all gray and there was no sunlight at all. The little stoic didn't close her eyes for the entire night, so she was a bit listless and dispirited. They followed the hollow flower hairpin corridor all the way to the east, intending to release the flying beast after they left the palace gate. However, she unexpectedly paused after turning a corner. She looked at the figure standing under the tree in the atrium, and an inexplicable sense of guilt arose in her heart. That's right, she was a coward who fled in defeat. She never expected that this person had already seen through everything about her and had been waiting for her here. The little stoic's footsteps faltered, and she paced behind the pillar like a mushroom, unable to think of what to say. Chapter 4998. Yet she heard that person call out loudly, "Jojo, good morning." With a radiant smile, he quickly walked toward her. The little stoic hid behind the pillar, pondering what she should say without hurting his heart. In reality, if she didn't truly care, with the little stoic's personality, she wouldn't have taken this matter to heart at all. She didn't want to treat him cruelly and inexplicably give him hope but also disappoint him. She also didn't want to be irresolute and make a mess of things. This person was one of the most important people in her life. He was her close friend, her confidant, and someone she would inevitably worry about for the rest of her life. But there was only one heart that loved hubby, and it couldn't be increased or decreased by a single bit. Hubby treats me wholeheartedly, and I also cherish him dearly. He is my lifelong dependence, and I will never leave or abandon him, and I will never forget him. It is only my heart. Why not tell Duan Yu everything clearly from the beginning? If it was impossible, then it was impossible. But the little stoic felt that 2 strands of hair on her head were about to turn white from thinking about how to speak. Her heart was tormented and conflicted. On the other hand, Duan Yu had already strode forward and pulled her out from behind the pillar with one hand. I don't want to make you suffer, and I don't want to make things difficult for you or disappoint you. I don't want to give you any hope because I especially cherish you. You are also a very, very important friend of mine. I just wanted to tell you. There is only one Lien in this world. Wherever Jojo's Lien goes, Jojo will go. If he ascends to heaven, I will also ascend to heaven. If he enters the Yellow Springs, I will also follow him. The little stoic only felt that her words were incoherent and unclear. She looked at him anxiously and asked, do you understand what I mean? Duan suddenly chuckled and flicked her forehead. What are you thinking about? You're always so thoughtful and love to think about all sorts of things at such a young age. Your thoughts are boundless. It can't be because I hugged you last night, so you feel that my heart is attached to you? You fierce girl, other than that stupid Imo Lien, who would dare to like you? Do you still remember how you beat me up when we first met? I'm not a fool. Why would I like to be abused by you? You won't give up until you hit a wall. That's not me. The little stoic pursed her lips and stole a glance at him. What's wrong with this person? How many years had it been? Why was she still harping on the matter of beating him up when they first met? Stingy. I'm just helping that idiot take care of you for a while. When he comes back, I'll immediately hand you over to him without any hesitation. Do you think you're easy to raise? Let me tell you. You're so annoying. All right, you don't have to say anything more. Hurry up and follow me to have breakfast. After you're done eating, go back to your room and get some sleep. Don't let your imagination run wild. The little stoic opened her small mouth, but her words were stuffed back down her throat by his string of words. Her footsteps involuntarily followed him. Breakfast was like a battle. This guy kept stuffing food into her mouth. The little stoic rubbed her round belly and followed him back to her bedchamber. If you leave without saying goodbye, I won't forgive you for the rest of my life, he suddenly said in a low voice. Arbor stole a glance at him before stiffening his neck and turning around. I, just went for a stroll. What do you mean by leaving without saying goodbye? Duan chuckled. Little heartless. Alright, you can go in. I still have things to do. Chapter 49-99. Arbor replied with an "oh" and slowly walked forward. His gaze remained on her from beginning to end, and the playful smile on his face dissipated bit by bit as she left. It was as if the starlight had dissipated, leaving behind a long river of serenity that seemed endless and unending. In the end, he only watched her walk in with a serene gaze before closing the palace doors behind her. The heavy sound of the doors closing weighed heavily on his heart. He stared at those two tightly shut palace doors for a long time before turning around to leave. Today, he was no longer in the mood for court matters and didn't want to think about anything. He had accurately predicted that she would flee far away in defeat, but he still didn't predict that his heart would still be so unbearable in the end. He entered the study, closed the doors, and opened the windows. With a wooden expression, he picked up the brush and wrote a vigorous and forceful Jing character on the unfolded paper. If his heart wasn't calm, how could he calm his heart? Jojo said that she didn't want to give him the slightest bit of hope, afraid that he would feel unbearable. But how could she have known that perhaps, as long as there was the slightest bit of hope, it would make him happy instead? Even if he would still be disappointed or even despairing in the future, at least he once had that slightest bit of hope. He threw down the brush and dampened the Jing character on the paper. Like the ripples in his heart, they spread outwards. I'm sorry, Jojo. I lied to you. I only didn't want you to leave. I purely didn't want you to leave me at this time. I was worried, I was afraid that once I left, we would meet again as strangers in the future. I lied to you that I didn't have the slightest bit of feelings for you, those were lies. I can't speak of the 10,000 points of affection I have for you in my heart. I only wish to bury them deeply and not give you the slightest chance to see through them. I like you, my heart is pleased with you, and I can't help but want to get close to you. Even if it's just watching you silently, my heart is enough, and this life is enough. Arbor slept until nighttime before waking up, and he was actually a bit groggy when he got up. The little stoic pulled a taut face and brushed open the window in passing. She then heard indistinct, fragmented words. Did you hear? The 9th princess got into a fight with 2 women in the rear garden. Lower your voice. Ever since the 9th princess married the prince of the barbarian tribe, she has been coming back to complain to His Majesty every few days. This is not a matter of a day or 2. A little palace maid with a sharp voice snickered and said, why would His Majesty care about her? They all say that a married daughter is like spilled water. Not to mention that His Majesty is not even her biological brother. Even if he was, who would care about the life and death of an unfavored princess? Do you know who those 2 women are? Who knows? Prince Doa has so many concubines. These 2 must have been taken in recently. Can the 9th princess beat him? Is the crown princess awake? Yuanzhen's voice came from outside the door. Come in. The young crown prince consort's voice was completely emotionless. Yuanzhen entered the door and bowed. Before she could open her mouth, she heard the little crown princess say, Auntie, there are 3 gossips outside. Have someone drag them in. Yuanzhen was taken aback, and she quickly turned around to give her 2 personal royal maids a look. Those 2 nimble royal maids hastily strode out the door and dragged in the 3 wailing junior palace maids in a short while, kicking them to the ground. The 3 junior palace maids were all quite young, and their eyes were flustered. They shrunk their heads back and didn't dare to meet the little crown princess's eyes. How could Yuanzhen not understand? Her face darkened, and she shouted angrily, How dare you? Crown Princess, spare my life. Crown Princess, spare my life. Chapter 5000. The 3 little palace maids panicked in fright, repeatedly kowtowing and apologizing to Arbor, loudly begging for mercy. Arbor sat there expressionlessly, coldly looking at the 3 people kneeling on the ground. Yuanzhen gave a meaningful look to the palace maid beside her. That palace maid quickly stepped forward, picking up a crying little palace maid on the ground, and coldly asking, Speak, who ordered you to come here and spread rumors? What is your purpose? Aunt, spare us. Crown Princess, spare us. Crown Princess, spare us, we don't know, we don't know. The little Crown Princess coldly glanced at them. With a wave of her hand, 3 dictum talismans flew into the 3 people's bodies. Speak, who ordered you to come here? It's Eunuch Yang. He gave us some mystic coins and food, told us to come here and pass on a few words. Yuanzhen's face instantly became very ugly. She naturally knew about this eunuch Yang. He used to be a respectable person by Empress Lu's side, and now he was one of the most capable great eunuchs by the Empress Dowager's side. But he was properly on duty at Renchuan Palace, so why did he come to provoke the little crown princess for no reason? Didn't he know that the little crown princess was not someone to be provoked? He simply didn't know how stupid he was to do this. Send someone to inform His Majesty. Where is that eunuch Yang? The little crown princess coldly asked. Yuanzhen only felt that things were not good, and her heart couldn't help but slightly sink. She quickly replied, Eunuch Yang is the Empress Dowager's Renchuan Palace's eunuch. Arbor stood up with an indifferent expression, walking outside. Go to Renchuan Palace. Crown Princess, do you want to go there personally? Although His Majesty had never had any interaction with this Empress Dowager Lu after ascending the throne, and never liked her. But if the crown princess just went there like this, then Yuanjun repeatedly signaled to the palace maid behind her with her eyes. That person understood, quickly and quietly retreated, quickly running towards the front hall. Today's matter was probably not over. Bring them along. The young crown princess ordered coldly, her face expressionless. From the first day she entered the Azure Palace, the days had never stopped. Previously, there was a palace maid who tried to poison her again and again. She couldn't take it anymore and killed her. Now, someone else had come to provoke them. Could it be that Jojo gave others the impression that he was a soft persimmon that anyone could step on? When a persimmon gets angry, it can also choke people to death. Arbor walked out of the palace doors with a stoic expression and headed for Queen Dowager Lu's Rinchuan Palace under the guidance of a group of people. The three little palace maids cried until their eyes were crooked and their mouths were slanted. Snot and tears flowed down their faces. They were tied up with ropes and dragged away. All the way, they couldn't help but let out faint sobbing sounds. "What are you crying for?" Arbor shouted impatiently. These people were really sick. They didn't have the ability, but they liked to go around provoking people. When they were caught red-handed, they always liked to act pitiful, making it seem like she was so cruel. If it weren't for people always coming to provoke her, she wouldn't have bothered with them for 100 years. Stuff their mouths first. Yuanjun kept thinking about the little grandaunt in her heart, hoping that His Majesty would quickly appear. Looking at this situation, it probably wasn't just that eunuch Yang who was unlucky. Empress Dowager Lu would also be implicated. The three little palace maids trembled incessantly. After their mouths were stuffed, they could only let out fragmented whimpers. Xiao Mu's mood only improved slightly after the ringing in her ears became much quieter. Chapter 5001. However, when the group of people turned to the back garden, they heard heart-wrenching cries before they had even taken a few steps. Several tumbling figures punched and kicked, tearing and pulling from one end of the path to the other. Unable to control their bodies, they fell and rolled into the flowers. Everyone could only stop in their tracks and look at each other. They saw three women with disheveled clothes and hairpins, as if they had gone mad, fighting in a chaotic mess. However, it was mainly 2 against 1. Grabbing the ends of one of the women's hair, they pulled and tore, tearing off half of her sleeve. On his bare arms, there were a few obvious scratches made by fingernails. This time, Aunt Yuanjun's expression became even more unsightly. Because she had already recognized who was being dragged and beaten by the 2 foreign women. It was the 9th princess, Rong Yuhu, who had married into the barbarian tribe not long ago. This was simply too outrageous. Why aren't you pulling them away? You're all dead. Yuanjun angrily berated. The small palace servants who were secretly watching this farce from the side hurriedly went forward to pull the 3 women. After separating them with great difficulty, Rong Yuhu screamed and wanted to go forward to fight back, but Yuanjun blocked her with one hand. "Prince Consort, you'd better think thrice before you act," Yuanjun said with a sullen face. "It's fine if those uncivilized shrews don't know etiquette. However, Prince Consort has received the best education in Art Sangzhou. Don't lose the demeanor a mistress of the household should have." Rong Yuhu stood there with disheveled hair. Her entire body was in pain, and her head was about to explode. Sangzhou's imperial family is only so-so. One of the foreign women who had been scolded by Yuanjun said with a face full of mockery, "The daughter they taught is even worse than us uncivilized shrews." "Impudent!" Yuanjun angrily rebuked. These 2 concubines of Prince Yuhua were too ignorant of etiquette and impudent. Where did they think they were? This was the inner court of the Azure Palace. They actually dared to be so impudent and bite the ninth princess in the back garden. It was simply Yuan Jin was so angry that her face turned green. The two exotic women both had the bloodline of the grassland. Their eye sockets were deep, and their noses were high. They were indeed beautiful, but their coquettish and rude appearance greatly reduced their beauty. We're not from Tsang Prefecture. You're just a servant in the palace. How dare you scold a guest like this? What a joke. Hurry up and get out of the way, we sisters still have to rush back to serve the prince. Isn't that so? The prince is still waiting for us in the bedroom. If we disturb the prince's mood, I don't think any of you can afford to take responsibility. The two girls really dared to say anything unrestrained. Yuan Jin's face turned ashen when he heard that. Arbor stood expressionlessly on the side. At first, he didn't want to interrupt, but when he heard the two women provoking the crowd, he couldn't help but frown. You're too noisy, the little crown princess said coldly. Even a pheasant sounds better than the two of you. The two women had been giggling, but when they heard the little crown princess's words, they couldn't help but be startled. Their laughter abruptly stopped. One of them shouted in exasperation, "Damned girl, do you want to die?" Yuan Jin was so angry that his heart was in turmoil. He angrily shouted, "Impudent! A concubine of a prince from a tiny barbarian tribe dares to be so rude in the inner court of the Azure Palace. Take them down." Immediately, 3 to 5 tall and sturdy female servants rushed over. Just as they were about to reach out and grab the two women. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.